had actually uh, not only followed his orders to the letter, by the way, and interacted with foreign leaders, specifically the Russians, leading up to the both the during the transition and into the actual presidency, past the day when Donald Trump took the oath of office and was engaging in behaviors untoward towards the United States, as it were, and the president who initially denied, well, he didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing inherently wrong in what he was doing. It's just anybody would be able to would do this. This is just natural, normal transition behavior in any type of administration. You're gonna be the new people running things. You're gonna be in charge of stuff. So you got to start talking to leaders and getting kind of a toehold, on what your administration's policies and behaviors are going to be like. And there's nothing odd about this, except for the fact that we had a bill, a multi-million dollar, perhaps billion-dollar real estate deal going on in the country that was interfering with our election, that was scuttled only by being found out. And then, you know, first of all, anybody who thinks the Trump Tower Moscow is off is, I think, a fool of the highest order. There is no way that it didn't just get the 4 or 8 year file cabinet treatment. No, a handshake deal until such time in the future as we are both legally able to carry forward this deal in the in an open and economically beneficial, mutually beneficial way. So the idea that Donald Trump somehow that they stopped, I have no deals in Russia, and I'm not going to have any deals in Russia. I don't have any money in Russia, which the parsing of the language gets finer and finer the more you drill down in this. And William Barr has, of course, shown this and gave a Fox News interview where he's basically acting as Hannity's monologue writer for the for this this week. And it should come as no surprise to anyone that while all this is going on, the president is throwing all these other kind of baseline election-oriented news stories against the wall to see what sticks, including a quote-unquote immigration plan, which if you were unfortunate enough to watch his muted, sniffly Rose Garden preach to the choir that he did in front of, he couldn't even keep himself from bragging about the fact that the people that he was actually giving the speech to that were in the audience in front of him, effectively for the unveiling of his great immigration plan, were all Republicans from the House and Senate. People who'd been, pushing him for this kind of stuff anyways. And the immigration plan, if it can be called that without a snicker, is in all facts simply a branding exercise. The only material difference that they seem to want to put in place is quote unquote a merit-based. We want it to be merit-based immigration system, which let's be completely honest, they have been taking advantage of for quite some time, in that there are certain visas available to certain jobs that are needed in the United States that get fast-tracked already. They just don't have a Build America Up Again label that's been attached to them. This is 100% a branding exercise, and aimed at 2020, because everything is just language. Most of the actual plans that they put forward, the sales pitch that they gave to their supporters, is either stuff that was already happening due to the economic wave that the United States has been on since the recovery, and only shored up or raised in any way by government intervention, which is one of the things I really want to talk about this week. David K. Johnson was on Morning Joe or AM Joy this morning, and he used a phrase that I talked about like 2 weeks ago that I think needs to be the the verbal hammer this election cycle. And people need to be aware that, as Democrats, we have a way of softening the conversation around a lot of things and going, well, if, and there's also, and some people might feel that, but in reality, one of those areas specifically is the idea that, we privatize the losses and the public pays for losses in terms of corporations and privatize the gains. And that is corporate socialism. Plain and simple. This government currently, and in many cases, by the way, and by the way, just like personal socialist programs, some corporate socialist programs are beneficial to the society as a whole. I'll even go there. But not the way this administration is running it. They are just doing a wholesale dumping of public funds at the feet of corporations to shore them up when they don't belong. And the two biggest egregious versions of this that I think play out most obviously is this case of these two Brazilian brothers who are essentially can't leave the country of Brazil, are in, they've been in jail and they've been found guilty of bribing thousands of Brazilian officials, and God knows how many in neighboring countries, and God knows if it looks like it wouldn't be surprising, anyways, if they did some of that behavior here. You know what I mean? Oh, Hal Vickery, thank you so much. And we missed you as well. And by the way, chat room, it's so good to see you guys. We're at infotainmentwars.com if you want to come and join the YouTube chat and talk to us. And of course, on Twitter at Hal Sparks, you can use the hashtag HSRPM, join the conversation there. But this idea of corporate welfare that that Republicans have had, while at the same time they run on this quote from Ronald Reagan, the most frightening words a person can hear is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." It's words he uttered while seeking office to run for government. So, this is like hiring a babysitter that hates kids and has a history of abuse. I don't know why you would do it, but so these Brazilian brothers bribing officials, they get, as a part of this farm bailout, somewhere in the order of $61 million. Not the farmers in the states that they buy from, which is an important distinction that must be made clear. The farmers that these guys buy from, the idea that there was going to ever be money that bank shotted through these guys into American farmers' pockets is a baseline absurdity, okay? But that in and of itself, I mean, that's one area. That's an obvious, egregious example of them bailing out the corporate side of something without actually helping the people who do the actual work. And we think in the terms of the 1% or the corporate heads in our country, in kind of Bernie terms, which is, why is it that the workers in the factory don't make the money that the people in the top office make? Like that. We think of that only in terms of manufacturing, but there are farms being drowned essentially under imposed debt due to the tariffs and market situations and the fact that food is hard to grow, right? All those aspects make it very difficult for farmers to operate, and Big Ag has been buying up huge swaths of land and private farms and personal farms forever at fire sale prices, essentially because
we lost you.
Oh, it happens.
We lost you, so I went on a break.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So
all right, are we?
It's okay.
Okay.
So we're coming back.
How long was I gone?
You want to come back now?
Yeah. Sure.
About
how
30 seconds.
Okay. You guys are robotic. I don't know if it's because of the restart, but
30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, that's fine. How long was I out?
You're in it and out right now.
Yeah, you are too. It's very weird because it says connected on my side and the signal's pretty good.
Can you hear me? Are you?
I can.
Okay.
I can hear you. And the chat is having we're fine on YouTube insofar as I know.
Okay. Now you good.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna fix this part of
Okay,
it.
I'll
That's my
have.
goal for this summer.
Should I have YouTube? I'm sorry.
Well, you're gonna be on a delay if you're listening to YouTube, but no, just go with this for the timing.
Okay.
If I fall out, just have YouTube kind of going. It'll just be on a delay of a couple of seconds, so it just means I won't lose the thought. But we're okay.
Right.
Yeah, they'll just have to rehear what I said.
Okay. Okay. So we're coming back in 45 seconds. We're coming back.
Excellent. Yep, the Russians. They're bless you, chat room. I know the YouTube always seems. Yes, thank you. We got 180 people in here and 36 likes. So everybody give us a thumbs up. Thank you for the super chats. Please do that if you can. I appreciate it. Or become a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/HalSparks. Become a member of the Blue Patch Brigade or a person of interest or, up into the Lab Rats and Queer as Folk stuff where you get scripts and all that other kind of stuff. They're multi-tiered things, but at the very level baseline, the Blue Patch thing allows you to bring a guest to any of my shows for free, which kind of pays for itself a bunch. I'm gonna go broke doing this thing. I know it. That's what my girlfriend tells me. But anyways, we'll be on in a second. As soon as that, the robotic Russians are kicking us. Well, thanks, Astro Chanteuse. And we're reconnecting, so she can't even bring me back up on there. Hold on. I don't trust the big machines. I hope you're getting audio from me in Chicago. So, Lady B, I hope you're firing us up on YouTube. I'm just going to continue on until this thing connects because the thought was very important. So, the primary thing we were talking about is this idea that these Brazilian big ag producers, largest I think producers of meat in the world at this point. And we have a side story about pork in the United States versus pork in China and all the stuff that's going on there that is an interesting side story to all of this. But the fantastic, like the infuriating part of this is that the farmers themselves, who are the ones who actually have to day try to keep their animals long enough to produce food from them, or keep plants alive long enough for them to produce food. And thank you, JJ Ray. Wow. All of those folks, all of them, are going under essentially due to this fact. They're ice skating uphill against market forces all the time, anyways. Meanwhile, the tariffs and the Chinese factor is devastating right at a time when they were already on the brink. Right? We often forget about farmers, and a lot of times, all of those folks. Oh, look at all of them. Lady B, I'm getting myself bouncing back to me. Under, so. Essentially, due to this fact, they're ice skating uphill against market forces all the time anyway. Meanwhile, the tariffs and the Chinese factor. The fascinating part to me is it's a prime example of this administration's idea about corporate socialism. They believe in corporate socialism. Another great example of it, quite frankly. I'm getting myself bounced back. Look at this. Listen to the loop happening. It's fascinating. I think I'm locked in, Lady B. If you want to talk to me directly, you can bounce off the YouTube and go straight to my audio. I think. So maybe not. So I take it back. Don't do that. So the other area is, and this is the part that drives me insane, is that we got Trump's financial filings this week. His companies made $464 million last year, which, by the way, for the record, considering their costs, is a loss. So what they didn't make $464 million in profit, by the way. And in some cases, the properties did. In some cases, the properties did make profits in curious amounts, specifically his D.C. hotel, for example. Which, foreign nationals and corporations are enjoying buying at above market price, which is effectively, a people call it the soft phrase is it's a violation of the emoluments clause, but in reality, it's a bribe. That hotel would be sinking if not for foreign influence. So let's just be honest about that part of it. Secondarily, you have in the case of Mar-a-Lago, for example, Mar-a-Lago, which we hear. I mean, the man is down there all the time. It's $200,000 to join the thing now. They raised the cost of joining Mar-a-Lago. Literally raised the cost of joining Mar-a-Lago when he became president. It is out in the open bribery, and so this it's an absurdity. So and it's still losing money. But you know what's keeping Mar-a-Lago afloat? You know what's making up a good portion of the difference? And you know why Donald Trump keeps golfing there besides the fact that he has absolutely no sense of irony and he has been acting as, the golfer in chief when he did nothing but lambast Obama for golfing. He spends, he spent more time on vacation and golfing than even George W. Bush, which is amazing, which in and of itself is a Herculean feat. But the reason he keeps going to Mar-a-Lago, for example, is because your tax dollars are keeping those doors open. Without him charging full price to the Secret Service for golf carts and hotel rooms and food and all that, and getting down there almost monthly, it would be even in worse shape. The biggest buyer for services at Mar-a-Lago right now, single buyer is the United States government. It's not the members. And the members are basically buying access to the president. So that is another egregious example of corporate socialism. The Republicans are corporate socialists. They think it is the responsibility of the taxpayer to keep businesses open. Now, I've talked in the past about how this works out in terms of pollution, for example. So big polluters pay I think the most they can pay is a $25,000 fee, a fine rather, for, which, I mean, it basically a fee, fine for dumping toxic waste, for example, in the ocean, or doing illegal dumping of any sort. It would cost them somewhere in the order of $100,000 to dispose of whatever they're throwing out, legitimately. So why, from a business standpoint, especially technically speaking, when the law is that as the head of a publicly traded company, you have to do everything that's in the interest of the stockholders, how could you legally make the case yourself that it is in the fiduciary interest of your stockholders to legally dispose of toxic waste? How do you even make that argument? How do you show up in front of your stockholders and go, okay, when we produce our product, we create 100 metric tons of this toxic waste. When we do this, it's just part of the deal, just what happens. And to get rid of it, it costs us, $40 million a year. But if we just dump it, if we put it on a boat and dump it in the ocean, we can do it for free. And if they catch us, they can only fine us $25,000 per incident, not even per barrel or per load. They can't even go back and check the manifest and go, hey, wait a minute, you guys have been taking this same boat out to the same spot 20 times this year. What the hell is going on? We're going to charge you as if, just like you get a speeding ticket. Whenever you get a speeding ticket and you're like, I wasn't speeding. Well, you have been in the past, so you're really getting a speeding ticket for the last one, right? So Again, this is where the Republicans are corporate socialists. And I think that is the phrase that needs to be hammered through the 2020 election. They are corporate socialists. If corporations are people, then the corporations that that Mitt Romney was talking about are welfare queens. They could not operate without your tax dollars. And if they can't operate without your tax dollars, why is the government picking winners and losers? Right? That part of it, I don't know why that isn't more of the conversation. It is a material fact that no one can argue with. And the analogy I always, like to look at is, take for example, a Dow Chemical or a pharmaceutical company, which, by the way, AOC had one of her best moments last week where she was asking why a HIV drug in the United States costs $2,000 and in Australia it costs $8 because they're subsidizing the cost of this drug off the American citizen and outsourcing it. And by the way, it might cost $8 in Australia, but that's effectively how their system works as far as a copay goes. It actually is probably more in the few $100s, but still, it is. And the drug itself was partially created through testing provided by the National Institute for Health and the CDC, which is corporate welfare. Most pharmaceutical companies run off of corporate welfare. Your tax dollars pay for the initial testing for so many drugs. And by the way, they should. I think it's a good idea that we as a community, as opposed to allowing corporations just kind of test stuff and yeah, sure, it works. Go, no, we have a standard and you have to filter through this. You have to bottleneck through the FDA and other things to test this stuff to make sure it's safe because people's lives are on the line. And by the time the market forces correct what you've done, if you put out something toxic, people are already dead. It is an integral part of why you have a government in the first place. So, and you guys know how I feel about the small government rhetoric. But in terms of, all of these giant corporations are benefiting off of corporate welfare. They are corporate socialists. And if they're going to use socialism as a bad word, at least tack that on and throw it back at them in that regard. Because if there is an existing socialism base to things like fire departments and police and all the, kind of an infrastructure in general, which, technically we use the term socialism because the idea that there should be some kind of government-funded work vaguely attaches to the phrase socialism. It is not an effective word to describe how our actual system works and that they are any more than because we make communal advances, they are somehow communist. These are loose words we've been throwing about. But if they're going to use that as a hammer to say people don't deserve this kind of help, then why do corporations, especially multinational and foreign corporations, and by the way, hog producers in the United States are having a really hard time right now. And it's ironic because in a normal situation, they would be more crucial to the economy of China than ever before. And I'll tell you why when we come back. We got to take a break. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. So I've taken a break, but there's a delay going to I'm going to roll back and talk to the chat for a minute and during the break. Lady B, I'm going to reconnect and hopefully we will fix the connection. It keeps jumping in and out. I'm not quite sure why. Can you restart the tie line for me? You'll see. Oh my gosh, this device is going to be the death of me. I've got good internet. Everything seems to be flowing, and then there's all this, and I don't understand. What happens? What are you talking about? Hell no. Okay. Yeah. I hear that. Can you hear me now? Does it seem connected?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll keep an eye on it. I'll move it closer where I can peek at it, but let's use the tie line and just go to the YouTube if it happens and just let me know. But then try to pop back if it comes back with any consistency. You know what I mean? I'm sorry you have to monitor this.
Okay.
Is it getting
Okay. No, you're fine.
okay?
Go.
Cool. Oh my god, the madness. There we go. Aren't emoluments bribes? Effectively, you know, the question becomes, the emoluments clause is effectively there to protect against this kind of thing, and it is. Can you say emoluments clause? Yes. An emollient in this case is essentially a bribe. Yes, exactly. It is. Well, there are soft ways that back when the founding fathers put this together as farmers, for example, that you didn't let your farm stop working while you were a president, but there was no, you know, well, I guess technically speaking, there was like an international tea trade, for example, and if you were going tea plants, specifically, tea tree, um, if you were, if you did have a product that was traded, tobacco was a great example. If you had a product that was traded internationally, and you were president or you were a senator or what have you, that had to be factored in to while you were in office. And back then, the existence of the government was shaky, so a lot of these folks couldn't count on the U.S. being there, so they had farms to eat. Right? Thank you, Victoria. You guys are being wonderful with the super chats today. I really appreciate that. That's amazing. Like, bless your hearts. Love you. And thank you. We got I think 5 new Patreon people this week. Or in the last 2 weeks. So we're up to 38 now, which is amazing. So I super appreciate you guys for doing that. Stephen Rowan and Kathleen and Bob Newman. You guys joined this week, I think. It takes a little while for it to factor in and stuff. Miles and Michelle Ligon.
30
Like,
seconds.
thank
And
you.
you're coming in great.
Excellent. Ligon, Jim Ferdig, you guys. I've sent a bunch of patches and all that kind of stuff out last week, and we're going to send a new run of them out soon, plus some scripts and some other stuff that people got, and we got some upcoming private live streams just for you guys, which is really kind of a chat and powwow about the show. So we'll talk about that in a bit. Every time I look over, I'm like, is it green or is it yellow? If it goes yellow, I'm screwed. So we'll see. Hey, we're coming back. Look at that.
This is Doris Davenport, host of The Doris Davenport Show, all local, all the time. I'm on every Saturday morning from 10 to 11, right before Hal Sparks. Now let's get back to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Yes, let's. Thank you, Doris. Doris is always amazing. Doris had every Chicago mayoral candidate on her show, I think, every single one of them. And that's the kind of local radio that we need in this country, and she does a fantastic job. And of course, we're followed by Dick Kay as well, who talk about the nitty and gritty of Chicago politics. The man knows everything. So, stick around for the lineup if you're in the Chicagoland area. And then, of course, you can always see us on YouTube and watch it later. You can join in the chat room now if you would choose to at infotainmentwars.com. It's the easiest way to get to us. It's the Hal Sparks channel on YouTube. And, of course, at Hal Sparks on Twitter. Now, it should come as no surprise that in the middle of the president's tariff war with China, that under any normal circumstance, most of the benefits of this circumstance could have been worked out without a gutting of the farmers in the United States. There is a side story going on right now that that is, I think, a curious aspect of Chinese colonialism and the growth of what would be foreign colonialism in the rest of the world. Both Russia and China have been doing a lot of activity, both in the Middle East, the Near East, and Africa over the last few years. And there's a belief system, I think, especially among the left in the United States, but through a large swath of of isolationist or nationalistic right wing Americans as well, that foreign the experience in the foreign in foreign theaters of both war and economics are a zero sum game, meaning that if the United States moves out, then those people in those areas will simply have their own space. They will, that if America would just get out of Chad and the Congo and the like, then they would just be allowed to be on their own. Well, what happens is that when we recede from there, and what has happened is that China and Russia specifically have moved in to make up the gap, because the idea is that we were there too long and we shouldn't have been there in the first place. So our removal in a lot of cases is perfunctory and leaves a vacancy as opposed to a transition, right? And any talk of a transition always, it gets very complicated, involves the UN, and everybody starts to get glassy-eyed and think that, we should, I don't even know why we're there in the first place, and kind of have the attitude towards a very complex international circumstance that's in line with their frustration about being in line at Starbucks. It has about as much forethought as that circumstance. And right now in China, they have 20%, it may even be more at this point, but 20% approximately of their of the pigs in the country, somewhere in the order of 200 million, have caught an African virus that there is no antibiotic for. It is not a superbug that has outgrown its antibiotics or a vaccine for it. They simply do not have one for it. And it is moving towards killing a third of the pork produced in China, for example. And the other big buyer that China buys from is the United States. As a matter of fact, the upper 10% of people in China eat American pork, while everyone else eats what's made and grown and processed in China. Often, by the way, as a bank shot through a couple of Brazilian criminals. So let's be abundantly clear that those guys that are getting the corporate bailout from the Trump administration, the two Brazilian crooks, are not under the tariff window and get to sell directly to China. So it is effectively the same thing as, when we heard about, HP and others getting around the Iran sanctions by selling, military gear disguised as printers, by bank shotting it through other factories, almost like a hacker's phone call in a 1990s movie about hackers. So a huge number of the pork produced in China is being affected. They are culling millions of pigs. It's horrifying how they're doing it. Many of them not even ill, by the way. They're doing it as a protective measure. And the virus itself that is spreading through the Chinese hog population is an African one, due largely in part to the interaction between China and Africa. Financially and economically. It is the same thing that has happened in the United States. It is why we have those silly, are you bringing any fruits or have you visited any farms things when people go through, when they're going through customs, even coming back from Canada or Mexico. Do you have any, vegetation with you, any kind of stuff like that? And you're like, does that mean the stuff I bought in the store? I have some dried mango with chile on it that's really delicious, and I wanted to get some. Does that count? No, just the fresh stuff. And usually just the plants, not the actual fruit itself. But wash this stuff before you bring it home. I'm just going to say. But point is, there is all this stuff going on internationally in terms of these, and the president's sort of slapdash approach to this is it shows that he has no ability to see past the end of his nose in terms of the value or damage done. Now, there are areas where both he and the Republican Party have made significant strides, both politically and psychologically, with large swaths of the public, left and right, that does not get talked about, with any regularity. And people in the chat room, yes, it is understandable to be completely concerned about the pigs, and it is very, very sad. But the point is, this is a factor where it could be a part of the negotiation even, and it isn't. But there are areas wherein, in protecting American farmers, the language around it is so forceful and so unapologetic that it wins over the voters and the supporters, even if the material fact doesn't work out. And that's one of the things that has been the most frustrating and the most kind of mind-boggling to, I think, most like Democrats and people on the left, where they're like, but they're lying. That doesn't even help. It's the bumper sticker idea. It's the kind of thinking that brought us the Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriotic piece of legislation that's ever been enacted. But with the name, hey, you can't argue with, why wouldn't you want to act like a patriot, right? So the essence of this, and I think the answer has to be, for whomever becomes the nominee on the Democratic side, that they must start to grow more comfortable with claiming more unapologetic language. That in and of itself, when people talk about he says what he means and he means what he says, and this idea that America First has a satisfying ring to it, even though it harkens back to people who used it for racist and anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant memes and ideas, decades ago. In modern parlance, that doesn't matter to a lot of people's ears, especially people who grew up after that. They didn't know it was a dog whistle until they were told it was a dog whistle. So it isn't, effectively. It does not affect them that same way. It simply sounds like an ad campaign. It sounds like New Coke to them, and that's fine. They don't have a problem with that. And there has to be some version of that where people on the left start getting, a lot more comfortable with unapologetic language. We got to take a break. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. WCPT820.com is the website where you can listen to all your favorite progressive and liberal radio hosts throughout the week. If you're not in the area, or you're driving outside of the Ranger, and you're one of these areas where Mitt Romney's company bought up all the progressive stations, turned them into local Glenn Beck carriers while they lose money, in spite of the fact that legally they have to do things that help their shareholders. They still do it anyways. And why do they? They essentially do it because it will guarantee them a propaganda outlet, and they write it off as a PR loss. Ta-da! It's that simple. It's a lesson we on the left need to learn, I suppose. But in the meantime, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Hal Sparks. Please support the show if you like it. You've been listening. If you've been a fan of Hump Days with Hal over the years, that kind of stuff, greatly appreciate the support. We'll be back right after this. See. Greetings from Miami. Well, hello, Christine, and congratulations on being in Miami. I suppose is a real thing. I had to give up beef and pork, and so far I passed the bacon test for 3 years. Right? Okay. So those burgers and Jewel pretty expensive. Yeah. Larry Lindsey, a former economic advisor to President George W. Bush. Oh, I got to roll back and see what you guys are talking about chat wise because I'm getting mid conversation on these. So, who's that Lindsey guy that said Trump is an? Oh, I see. That's what. Yeah. Yeah, they literally said they were Republicans were having a discussion about Donald Trump behind the scenes, and said he scores a 10 out of 10 on the narcissist scale. Here's damn it, this you guys have to understand. Again, they don't view that as a negative. They, when you tell the people on the right that Trump is a narcissist, when you go, oh my God, the man is a narcissist. People on the left go, duh, of course he is. And what a horrible thing to be. People on the right go, yeah, he is. And you would be too if you had his cool furniture and his sexy wife and his money and his TV show and his best-selling books, and you're just jealous. That's I swear to God, that's where their brain goes. They just like straight to that. I mean, it is so funny, I think, how most of the insults yes, you should. Ben Glebe is running for president. At this point, I ought to throw my hat in the ring. It's almost absurd. But if I ran, I would not run against the Democrats. There are far too many of them. I would run as a Republican, just a really liberal Republican. I mean, like the most. I mean, why not? Who says I can't? Right? Who cares? But honest to God.
10 seconds.
Okay, great. I want to talk about this as we come back in.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
So we're just talking in the chat how a former member of the Bush administration, Larry Lindsey, meeting with McCarthy and some of the other Republican heads, they all gathered in one of these behind-the-scenes gaggles, where, in a very similar one to the one that happened with Paul Ryan, where they're all, there's a recording of them going, if there's, Trump works for Putin and so does Rohrabacher, that kind of thing where they speak openly in these situations. And apparently they were saying that Donald Trump scores 10 out of 10 on the narcissist scale. And I had to bring up, and I have to mention this, folks, you have to realize that half the things you think are insults about Donald Trump only qualify as insults within your bubble of thinking humans. Because when people on the left and Democrats and liberals call Donald Trump a narcissist, we know what that means. We know that he can't see past the end of his nose, that he's a self-involved maniac who's only interested in his own self-interest. It is an absurdity to expect a person of that intellectual and social scale to be able to serve other human beings genuinely. It is, they will always take their own self-interest first. They have a Darwinian approach to life always. And they have an emperor's new clothes view of themselves. They literally are able to lie to themselves, which is the dangerous part, which is why he thinks he has a loving relationship with Kim Jong-un, by the way. And for the record, if Donald Trump was a member of Kim Jong-un's family, he'd be dead by now. Kim Jong-un would have killed him in a minor power struggle if Donald Trump was interacting with him as in the way that he has as a member of his family or as a member of his, I don't know, is it technically a cabinet? Is it a mausoleum at this point? I don't know what you do in that in his upper echelon of people who technically work in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So when we call him a narcissist, it's meant as an insult. When they hear it, including Donald Trump, by the way, whenever anybody calls Donald Trump a narcissist and everybody on the right goes, Well, yeah, he's an egomaniac, but you would be too if you had his house and his curly Q French furniture and his great tower and his sexy ex-wives and his money and his travel and all these, you're just jealous that you can't get prostitutes to pee on a bed in Moscow. That's your problem. You're just jealous. You just hate success. That honest to God, that's how they hear it. You have to start thinking. They tell you in marketing and as a performer, they tell you, you have to think about your audience and how your audience hears stuff, not how you hear it when you're saying it. Marketers have to think about their audience. And I think one of the areas where you can arguably say that the Republicans have been more successful than Democrats throughout is in the branding exercise. Because A, they're not afraid to lie blatantly. Like every lie Democrats get caught in is largely a soft lie that's mostly true, but there's some wiggle room. It's at worst a gross generalization. You can keep your doctor if you want to, is one of the ones they keep throwing back. And no, you can't keep your doctor if your doctor won't actually provide services for you if your life is in danger. You don't get to keep a doctor who will put a shelf life on you being alive because it's not financially viable for him or his network. If this doctor wants to be in a network that says at some point, sorry, kid, you got too many holes in your spine, you're just not worth saving, then no, you can't keep that doctor. But what kind of maniac would want to? Well, somebody who thinks they'll never, ever be sick, and if they do, they can shelve it off onto other people. Again, the corporate welfare concept. That at some point, these big insurance firms will figure that Medicare and Medicaid will pick up the slack for the people they don't want to care for. So they can look like, we care. It's what we do. We care for people. That's right. Blue Cross, Blue Shield. If you move, you're screwed, but we care. Meanwhile, if you fall below that window, if you get to the point where you can't afford services anymore, or you're just too sick for them, tough. You're just not a keeper, quite frankly. Sorry. So that in the case of, well, I mean, you guys get the point. When you're languaging your stuff, you have to think about your audience. And the Republicans only think about their audience's ears, not their bellies or their brains. And Democrats try to think about everybody's belly and their brains first. But people don't react that way. Most people react out of fear. It's one of the reasons why, Bernie's message got through so strongly last round. It's not that much different. There's almost zero gap between him and Elizabeth Warren, except for the fact that Elizabeth Warren is laying out a plan for everything. And by the way, in the 2020 field, statistically right now, Biden is far ahead. But Elizabeth Warren would be within the margin of error with Joe Biden if Bernie wasn't in the race. If Bernie, who is not a Democrat and is running as a Democrat, and once the race is over will not be a Democrat after that point, but is using the Democratic Party as a super PAC, and you can have whatever feelings about that you want, and you go, well, would you rather run him as an independent? All that argument aside, if Bernie was not running, statistically, all the supporters of him would go to Elizabeth Warren, and Elizabeth Warren would be running neck and neck with Joe Biden. That's just a material fact. And largely, the reason why his messaging got through last time was because he was able to speak in grand terms. And they were not indicative of some of the realities that he had. If you actually drill down, there's always issues with every human being. But if you can speak in these, because he became a millionaire because of his book and because of, and his response was, write a best-selling book, you can become a millionaire too. Well, it's just not helpful to people that find themselves in that circumstance. And if he thinks you don't need millions to survive, and this is it's a form of almost cruelty to hoard money in those regards, there's areas where he could have simply said, we gave a portion of the book sales to blah, blah, blah. And that would be the message. That wasn't the message. So, but what worked, what got him there was a very direct messaging, which was on par with how Donald Trump talks to people and how, while the Democrats are putting together a comprehensive immigration plan that, by the way, could pass with bipartisan support of both the House and Senate, were it to go through, what Donald Trump put out this week is the immigration version of the budget that Paul Ryan put out that was a 12-page pamphlet that one of the pages had a picture of a cowboy on it. Just a guy on a horse. So you got 12 pages to tell me your pamphlet. Page 1's the cover. Last page is blank. So we're down to 10. Then there's half pages with pictures on them. So, you're culling about 3 pages in that, in just what would be eaten up with actual text. And then one whole page eaten up with the Marlboro Man. And effectively, you've got a whole 4.5 pages to talk about your ideas for how we're going to help people. That's a sales document. And if it's true, it's a great sentiment. But I don't care. I'm assuming you're going to help people. I'm assuming you think your plan's going to help people, or at least that's what you're going to tell me, whether it's true or not. I'm assuming that's part of the pitch. How? Specifically, how? And in the case of the immigration plan, basically he's just renaming the foreign worker visas the Build America and Make It Awesome visa, and limiting it basically to computer programmers and middle management people. Basically people who had the opportunity to become part of the 1% already over here. People like the Brazilian brothers. That's who that's aimed at. So, anyways, like that in and of itself, like languaging wise, if you guys are getting angry about some of the stuff Trump says on Twitter and some of the the stuff that constantly comes up, when you are going to respond, and I know you will, understand that you need to respond in a way that your audience will hear you. We have been preaching to the choir so horribly over the last couple of decades. And we wonder why, when we win, the people that win have been able to capture this, specifically Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Yes, we can. When in reality, in every circumstance in life, everybody runs up against a no, we can't. But it's a yes, we can attitude that helps you win the victories that you can. That you actually, so you get some points on the board. And you go into every game with that idea, even if you fail. And you get up and you try again, because that's how you have to do it. But this idea that we, in terms of branding, we have to agree with ourselves all the time. And if that non-inclusive language is thereby exclusionary, which we'll talk about in the next hour, is damaging to our entire methodology. So, corporate socialism. That's what the Republicans are running on. They are corporate socialists. Mitt Romney was a corporate socialist. Donald Trump is a corporate socialist. He is benefiting from corporate socialism. If you go, but that makes socialism a bad word. Who cares? We're not going to scuttle the programs because the label is bad. If the label fits them more than it fits us, then use it. Especially they're the ones that hate it. Oh my God. We'll be back. Okay.
Avoiding another government shutdown, as well as raising the debt ceiling.
Oh, my
Current
God.
government funding is set to expire at the end of September. Separately, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer will meet with President Trump next Wednesday. It will be a follow-up of
I'm going to sneeze, so hold on, guys. Sorry about this. Hold
The
on.
nation's midsection will be back.
It's dusty. How you guys doing, chat room? I got on a real rant there. So, I feel like I've left you guys in the dust a little bit, and I apologize. I want to because I want to. Let's see. I don't hate Biden, but he's out of touch. He's leading big now, but wait until the debates. Here's the issue I have, Terrence, and I'm curious about what you think, chat room. I hear this all the time about Biden's languaging about both Trump supporters and independents, and that you have to speak to the whole country. It is simply another languaging of the there's not a red America and a blue America. There's just the United States of America, which Barack Obama ran and won on, was effectively the message that jettisoned him to the top of the pile, right? It's effectively the same kind of languaging. It's a softer version of it as far as how he's saying it, because he can't say it as Barack Obama said it. But essentially, that's what they're. But here's what I think people on the left don't understand: that when Donald Trump says you have to reach out to Trump voters and try to lure them back, and you have to reach out to Republicans who are troubled by this president and give them a lifeline. On the one hand, that's just materially true. That there are people who voted for Obama, who voted for Trump, and they want to come back, or they could come back if they feel like, because it's not like they're going to vote for Trump next time. They just might not vote at all, but you need them on board. You have to motivate them to vote. And that's how you do it. You by going, I don't vilify you. I think you rolled the dice on something and you feel bad about it now. You're welcome to come back to us, and we're offering a positive vision for the country. You have to be able to say that. And secondly, when people go, it's ridiculous. These people are just racist monsters and never speak to these people ever again. They're villains. That may be true of those people, of those Trump voters. But saying that about those Trump voters, at least offering the lifeline and being open to that idea, while it may not appeal to those Trump voters at all, it does appeal to independents who go, hey, at least this guy isn't making monsters out of the other side, even so much as certain ones may deserve it. Maybe there are deplorables out there. But in an independent's mind, this person is willing to see past the deplorables to the people who are just mistaken. And that is appealing to the independent voter and the non-voter that will be crucial to turning certain states on an electoral college level. That message is not for Democrats. He's not chastising Democrats in that regard. That's not, and I guarantee you, it's one of the reasons why he's ahead, and why he's got 40% support for voters of color within the Democratic Party. He's got the biggest support group within voters of color in the Democratic Party, and specifically voters of color who lean more conservative. Which is an amazing detail of Biden's support structure right now. Joe's record shows he's no progressive. He may not be, but he's a liberal. And, the idea is, do you get, it's the go down swinging idea. It's not like he's not going to be for Medicare and Medicaid expansion, the support of the ACA, and the eventual growth of a public system available to the people. That's exactly what he's shooting for. In the same way that Hillary Clinton was for a $15 minimum wage, but was just allowing states and municipalities to go from 12 to 15 because not all economies are equal across the country. Some can support it right away. Others have to grow into it. She made that case, and because she watered it down, people thought she was against the $15 minimum wage. And she got hammered for it by people who are like, no, make it the law. Well, it's never going to be the law, and it certainly isn't now. Trump is in office. But, it was enough to drag into it. So this is a, let's see. It was interesting watching Chris Matthews in the PA town hall the other night. Oh, we're coming back. Hold on.
You're listening to the House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at housesparks.com.
Well, I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn, plus face.
5 seconds, please.
Progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
So, Trump's sniffly Rose Garden Stephen Miller speech that he came out and gave him, which was effectively a sort of a PR approach to bills that Lindsey Graham is already working on in some ways. It's effectively just a messaging exercise, not really a process, an actual plan. Again, just taking existing programs and renaming them, like that section of the Air Force that deals with, that became the Space Force, right? So, and there's a couple of reasons why that is the case. One is William Barr is on a tour of scuttling the Department of Justice and undermining the FBI as best he can. I mean, honestly, if you were Vladimir Putin, could you ask for a more useful idiot than Donald Trump and William Barr right now? Like, that combination undermine literally the gutting of the Department of Justice and the faith in the FBI. I mean, the idea that you could do it at all, but that it would be the Republicans doing it is amazing. I mean, as a hat trick of propaganda and destruction, it is awe-inspiring. I mean, you really have to be amazed. Literally, the Republicans never could have hacked their way into the FBI and done this much damage. And the way that, like, the right wing and the Hannity offshoots that are out there, think that literally hang their entire argument on text messages between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. People who said things about Donald Trump after seeing evidence that he was engaged in things that would violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. After seeing the evidence against him, suddenly they're biased against him. That these people, the way they spoke about Donald Trump, it was an insurance policy to keep him from getting it didn't work, and they didn't ever use it, and they never leaked any of this stuff during the campaign. But never mind. This is signs that the government was just set up against Donald Trump to never let him get in, and then he magically, because of the will of the people, got in there. That these people are an example of how horrifying and terrible the bias of the deep state is against Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham said exactly the same things during the campaign while he was running against Donald Trump, and then is now his single most trusted senator. He is the guy who runs the most interference. So if the behavior of Peter Strzok and Lisa Page is indicative of that these people cannot be trusted, and there's no material evidence whatsoever at all, zero, that they affected an investigation in any way, that obviously scuttled the election chances of Donald Trump and certainly haven't hamstrung his presidency in any way, because according to Trump's own DOJ, they were not able to find a reason why Mueller's team was doing anything untoward, and were simply looking at Trump through a lens that was set up and made total sense. There was a reason to have a special prosecutor. That special prosecutor did his job. Now, the report and what they said was in the report, that's an entirely separate story. But for God's sake, so we, in looking at all this stuff, they are hanging their entire thing on the oranges of the Mueller investigation. We need to look into the oranges that got all tangerine up in the of the beginnings of the start. What's the word for it? Oranges? The start of the Mueller investigation, that was because of this dossier, they got a FISA warrant, which is completely, and that qualifies as foreign influence, even though this was a guy hired by a private firm, by the Washington Examiner, a Republican newspaper that was trying to scuttle Donald Trump's chances in the beginning. They hired him. Then they put this report together, and the DNC and the Hillary campaign bought it from them as Oppo research after the fact. I mean, well, that's all been litigated. Meanwhile, we find out that why are they putting out this immigration thing? Because William Barr's little PR scam that he's running is working as preaching to the choir, but completely ineffective in turning anyone else's head. And Donald Trump's approval rating has actually gone down since the Mueller report came out. For all the people saying that, here's William Barr coming out here and ruining these shots, ruining and the chance of the Democrats in the House to get all the information that he's running interference. All that will fall away. The courts will, I believe, allow the Congress to view all these things. And by the way, most of the stuff that they're seeking, most of it, especially Trump's financial stuff, is being sought by state attorneys general about specific crimes that Trump is involved in those particular states, namely New York, D.C., and Virginia. And they have been received already in those areas by those separate attorneys general beyond the special counsel's office. So there may be stuff that special counsel's office never sought to get that the Democrats in the House will be able to get through those other sources. So that's how it's going to end up. It's going to get there. They're going to get this stuff, and it's going to be embarrassing. And the longer Trump pushes this stuff off or tries to run interference on it, the closer it brings it to the election cycle. And they're hoping that either it gets too close, where it gets inside that window and protects them, because people are going, well, we can't talk about it. We're right on top of an election. You can't have these kind of investigations going on in the middle of an election cycle. So they're hoping to drag it until that point. But they're not going to be able to. And a lot of this stuff is going to come out. And it's going to be a very embarrassing August for this president. And all through the fall, when everybody's locked back into watching cable news after the summer, there's going to be plenty of stuff to hash through. But meanwhile, before we even get to the summer, as we roll into summer and everybody pretends that nobody pays attention to the news anymore, while the left and right tribes still are yelling at their TVs, and everybody else is allegedly barbecuing. The Flynn story turns a major corner this week. So, federal courts revealed new information that show that Flynn was discussing U.S. policy before he was legally allowed to, and at the direction of the president. Specifically, the area where he discussed sanctions with Sergei Kislyak. And Judge Emmett Sullivan ordered the release of transcripts, which will be coming out this week, in which Trump's lawyer, John Dowd, was discouraging Flynn from cooperating with federal prosecutors. That in and of itself, that is obstruction of justice. That is very specific. Now, Dowd, the best case scenario is that Dowd argues for his own, that it was just him. The president didn't tell him to. He was just advising Flynn that he shouldn't, do that just for his own right. In which case, Dowd himself could go down for this. I doubt it, though. I think we're rolling into another situation where Dowd will end up cooperating with a separate prosecution by the time this is over. There are still outliers in these stories. Mueller still is insofar as I know, as of this hour, is still an employee of the Justice Department. There are still 14 outlying cases involved in this. This very well may be one of them, one of the redacted ones. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio. We'll be back right after this. I think we will. Yeah, we will. Okay, here we go. There's the music. I knew it. We'll be back right after this. Remember, hashtag corporate socialist. Don't be afraid to call a business that's sucking off the tea to the public arena that. We'll be back. let's see. According to the Steele dossier, he claimed he received information from the Russian embassy in Miami. Embassy does not exist. Newly released testimony. Yeah, the reference to the embassy in Miami is in some ways, I guess, because Steele was, as far as the languaging of it, was referring to a consulate office there, not technically an embassy. So, yeah. The bought and paid for dossier. Yes. Is the Steele dossier available for the public to read? Yes, it is. It's been out since BuzzFeed initially released it. Yeah, smash that like button, folks, for us. We got 248 viewers and 98 likes. I know more of you in that group like it than don't. Even if you give it a thumbs down, it still benefits me, so I don't care. It's kind of like the whole thing in in the whenever I get in a thread arguing, especially like gun rights or that kind of stuff. I get a lot of, because I'm a comedian and an actor, like who the heck is Al Sparks? That kind of thing. Like they pretend their kids don't watch my show. But I've always said, like, I'm the guy whose name is now in your head. You're welcome. Yeah. Do I use drops? You mean like a hollowed out tree trunk to like put a suitcase in? I'll don't forget to call people at the southern border Christian refugees. Oh yeah, I see. Messaging for that. Yeah, corporate libertarians. There's no such thing as a corporate libertarian. Don't forget. Yeah, corporate socialists. Benghazi was a consulate and not the embassy. Right. Why do you think Biden is liberal? Because Biden is liberal. I'll push Patreon. Okay, yes. Patreon.com/Hal Sparks. Please support the show. Support
5 seconds.
Okay, support our independent media. Support this show. We don't get the backing from the Mercers.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So, according to the newly released reports on this, Flynn, obviously, Dowd was telling him don't cooperate with federal prosecutors. Flynn ignored him, pled guilty on December 1st, 2017, admitted he lied to federal investigators about his conversation with Kislyak, and in a sentencing memo filed last year, prosecutors said Flynn, quote, provided substantial assistance in 3 investigations, 2 of which are ongoing. I am curious if the 2 that, and that's part of the redacted part of the Mueller report of I think it's either 12 or 14 currently that are in there, then I'm amazed that you could have a conclusive final report that puts a pin in everything that still has 14 open investigations, of which, by the way, Gates is still cooperating in, who was, second in charge to Manafort, who is now in jail. The president's campaign chairman is in jail, and his deputy is still cooperating with federal prosecutors in at least 12 ongoing investigations. So, and it may be, according to this, that the president, another one of the president's lawyers is named in an investigation of obstruction, specifically dealing with Flynn, who is continuing to cooperate as well. The defendant, this is the quote, defendant informed the government of multiple instances, both before and after his guilty plea, where either he or his attorneys received communications from persons connected to the administration or Congress that could have affected both his willingness to cooperate and the completeness of that cooperation. So not just the president and the administration calling, but he's having his toadies in the House and Senate call. A newly unredacted court filing released Thursday said, Jim Jordan. Among other things, the transcripts could reveal the identities, quote, of persons connected to the administration or to Congress, broadening the circle of people implicated in Trump's attempt to quash Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of Russian election interference. Now, this is the part that drives me the most insane. Now, there's all through the last couple of weeks, and since his testimony in front of the House, Bill Barr has been pushing this idea that that Trump knows he's innocent, and therefore it's not obstruction if you know you're innocent and you try to kill an investigation. But it presumes facts not in evidence, mainly that Trump is innocent. Because Barr is taking the president's word that he is innocent. He is not taking the report's issues on both obstruction and the president's engagement with members of his staff that are found guilty of being unregistered foreign agents and lying to Congress and lying to the special prosecutor's office and to FBI agents. He's not taking that seriously at all. He is simply floating on the word of the president. If the DOJ runs on the word of the president and the president's word is he's innocent without any factual basis to back that up, then the law means nothing. There is no law in a country in that circumstance. If somebody just thinks they're innocent or thinks they're justified, because the president in many ways thinks that what he was doing was not wrong, even though it was. But he's of the opinion it's not wrong, and since he's president now, it isn't. This is the Nixonian concept of, well, if the president does it, then it is not illegal. Taking on steroids, on acid, on whatever hack 1980s comedy tale that you throw on the end of a sentence to make it a joke. In that case. So in the case of, Barr coming out and saying this repeatedly, that the president, if he believes himself to be innocent, then he can't be obstructing justice. In and of itself, again, there is no way to know if that belief system is based on anything from Barr's standpoint, other than the fact that he views himself as working for the president and whatever the president says is gold. That's been his whole push in this entire thing, that the president cannot be guilty of obstructing justice if the just thing is that he not be investigated. Which, again, takes the president at his word and makes it a completely, monarchical, oligarchical, use your, kingship, serfdom and fiefdom, all of which, by the way, antithesis to democratic society. Anti-democratic, therefore, un-American. Period. End of story. William Barr is engaged in un-American activities. There you go. You want to get labely and McCarthyist about that? That's where it falls in. That's where it works. That's where it's an actually functioning label. Because if the president can be a king, there is no democracy. So, and by the way, it hasn't been working. As a matter of fact, it's been rather embarrassing. And when you've got people like Judge Napolitano on Fox News basically freaking out on air, so much so that they have to give him separate segments without the other hosts to air this stuff because Hannity won't sit for it and the Fox and Friends people don't understand it or get upset when he talks about it. They had to go stand, look at the segments that Judge Napolitano is now doing about Donald Trump's obstruction of justice. He's doing them outside the building. He's outside. They take a camera and stand outside on the street like a crazy person. They just go down to the Port Authority, stand in front of the bus station, and start screaming at this point because that we can't be. None of our people will be next to you when you explode. So, this, and by the way, somebody in the chat room is asking me why I'm against tariffs, which I'm not, for the record. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't mind jumping into that, but staying on track with the Flynn story is that there is the May 31st. The transcripts is the deadline for them to be made public. Whether they'll meet that deadline, much like Mnuchin not releasing giving the president's tax returns and details via the IRS. Which he legally is obligated to do. He is in violation of the law criminally right now. I don't know why they have to wait for him to do it. Technically, they don't. If they have the right to do it, they could literally walk over there and request it from the clerk. And unless Mnuchin or somebody is there physically to block them, they can walk out the door with them because they legally have the right to request them. I think they're trying to be nice about it. And the longer the Trump administration, blocks the release of his taxes actively, as opposed to not releasing them, which was, supposed to be a big deal and stopped being a big deal because nobody cared because they assumed he was a millionaire and not a debt vulture, which is what he is. But, because, and again, Donald Trump's entire company, his corporation, ever since he's run it, has never run a day on profit. It is always run on debt, not a single day. Everybody listening to my voice, with rare exception, unless there's some odd hedge fund manager living off his parents' money for 20 years and rolling debt. Everybody here has taken their salary, used the extra part beyond their bills to buy things they like. If you've done that in your life, you've done something Donald Trump has never done. Donald Trump's money has always come from banks and other lenders who are getting bilked, by the way. He has lied on loan application after loan application. He has inflated his net worth, and he lives off that debt. And if you're like, dude, you can't argue with success. Dude gamed the system. He made it or whatever. Then you're morally corrupt, and you have other issues that have nothing to do with politics. You're a social Darwinist, and I have a feeling that if you a couple of beers in at a party, you'd start talking about how we have to cull the herd. So, everybody, if you've lived your life even remotely within the rules of normal engagement, you have actually done something Donald Trump has never done. His dad did it. His siblings have done it, but he hasn't. So the Flynn transcript they have to release, which includes a voicemail, a recording by Dowd, allegedly, that according to the Mueller report, they have seen, where there's a quote that, and chunks of it are redacted for personal reasons, so people don't get upset, that if there's information that implicates the president, then we've got a national security issue, as if the idea is that if the president, this is an amazing loop, Dowd said, so, we need some kind of a heads up. Meaning the idea is that if the president gets busted doing something illegal, then it puts the country in a dangerous situation. It's upsetting, it upsets the national security balance, and it puts us in a situation where foreign leaders and foreign actors might take advantage of the fact that America's in a dip because our president is engaged in having to defend himself against criminal liability. And in those cases, Dowd is making it the investigator's fault. Dowd is making it the fault of the special counsel and of the law itself. It's the law's fault. If you would just let this guy go on being criminal, we wouldn't all be financially hurt by this. And by the way, this is the thing that kept Donald Trump afloat in New York this entire time. The same thing that with, Jared Kushner's company and his dad and the whole blackmail issue with his uncle and all that nonsense. And we're going to take a break, and Ike's on the line, so I will pick you up because I think we can get calls. I think we're functioning, Lady V. Are we not? We should be able to. Have we been clear for a while?
Yes.
Sonically? Excellent. Okay, we'll be able to take calls after this break. 773-763-9278 if you want to call in. But they are literally using the idea that that a criminal president puts the nation in danger, not because of his criminality, but because he would get caught. And I mean, the morally upended, disgusting aspect of that cannot be oversold. We'll be back. It's the Housebox Radio program, Mega Worldwide. On our YouTube channel is infotainmentwars.com. That'll redirect you to the YouTube page. Join in the chat there. Go ahead. Give me hell. We'll be back. And insofar as tariffs go, for example, there are absolutely ways that the Chinese mess with the system, and they're currency manipulators. They absolutely put tariffs on U.S. goods and limits on what can go over there. Beyond even just cars and the like, they do it with you can only show certain volume of movies. Canada does the same thing, but Canada has it as a protectionist issue because Canada would be swamped by American media, for example, if not for their Canadian content laws. And I respect it, and I think the United States actually would benefit from something along those lines. I don't mind those kind of things. It's simply the slapdash approach to doing it. And we are in an economic war with China. This is just gone. It went from a Cold War to a hot war under Donald Trump. And when you're going to a hot war, it is best if you have your allies in place. Now, the TPP, as much as people hated it, was an alignment of economic forces exclusive of China that was meant to basically, as an economic, circle around them to go, if you want to join this, you have to start behaving. But because of our knee-jerk reaction against trade deals due to, a kind of the backlash against NAFTA, which is, part bad sales and part bad application. The TPP itself was scuttled no matter who was selling it because of NAFTA, not because of the merits of the TPP deal. And it was meant to get both European partners and Southeast Asian partners around China, namely Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, other areas like that, to kind of balance the power against the growth of China in these arenas or whatever. But it got scuttled. The thing you do when you're going to do these kind of things is you coordinate with your partners. Right now, we are in a tariff fight, not just with China, but with Europe and Canada as well. And part of good strategy is picking your battles. And we don't have an imbalance on the scale that Trump says we do with China in those regards, as far as goods coming into the country. We buy those goods because they're cheap, not because, they in many cases, they were ever made here. The bigger electronic stuff, like the larger priced electronics and the like, we haven't manufactured in a long time. Washing machines are slightly different. We make more cars and that kind of stuff in the country, but we don't make a lot of TV and most of the stuff, by the way, that like made in China that you see, especially when it comes to iPhones, for example, they're assembled in China. A good member of the a good portion of the parts are made in the United States and in South Korea. So these pieces, elements of the chipboards, the lenses.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
He's already starting to rant in the chat room in all caps, so we have to let him on the air. Ike, I think, is on the line with us. I want him to be able to come on and talk. Simply so he doesn't yell at the chat room. It's like, what is he with us? Do we have him, Lady B?
Yes, we do.
Oh, good. Okay, here we go. Welcome, Ike.
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
Hey.
Yeah, don't get me started on trade, man. I'm an ex-union man. My mom was the assistant business agent for the union down in Florida. We handled the bus drivers, cafeteria workers in the schools. We handled the painters, which handled the painters. We were the guys that did your Walt Disney World, the hotels, MGM Studios, and Cape Canaveral. That's where I worked for years.
Right.
And I can tell you firsthand what the game is. I went to labor school. I know how this game works. And yes, it's all good for socialism when they spread the wealth amongst themselves. I'm sorry, it becomes socialism when they spread the loss. They take all the profit. They spread the loss.
Yeah, corporate. That's corporate socialism every time. Yep.
Right, and multinational corporations are the enemy. Walmart, Target, Lowe's, Home Depot, these mega stores and these mega corporations that have no compunction whatsoever. They are not a good corporate citizen.
Right.
And for you folks out there that are arguing this, just so you know, back in the day, if you want to go back to the real good old days, I believe it was the first 150 years that we were in business here as a country. you had to have a charter given to you by the government to be able to have a business.
Yep.
And you had certain standards you had to meet. And if you didn't meet them, they'd come and take your business and they'd throw your butt out on the street where you belong. So,
well, and by the way, and again, this is like,
serious,
yeah, real quick. This is one of those areas where the analogy I like to use is that some of these companies just simply say, well, if we don't do this, we can't stay in business. Well, if I had a coffee shop and the only way I could stay in business was to shoot one customer a year, you'd put me away. You know what I mean? It's like nobody needs coffee that bad. Sorry, dude. If you can't run your system without shooting a paying customer once a year, then you can't be in business. But so many of these companies literally operate in that. And I don't mean just like, dead people, not just they make everybody a little sick or they pollute the environment in a soft way. I mean, actual dead people.
I like the analogy when I hear these right-wingers talking about, or these business owners talking about how they're so run down and so poor, and they're just barely staying in business and all this. And the first thing I think of, well, then you must not be much of a businessman. If you can't run by the rules, and if you can't pay a decent living wage and keep your employees from having to get food stamps and making the taxpayer pick up the money for the labor that you're not paying for,
right?
Well, then you know what? Yeah, you need to be out of business, and you need to let somebody else come in there that can play by the rules, can treat people like human beings and pay them decently. We don't need your kind in business in this country.
Right. Well,
and don't think that for every person that goes out of business, there's not 5 more that can do it and do it better.
Well, that's the funny thing is that they're talking about we need to do this because these companies make a profit and we need this profit to go, because the tax dollars to go. But then they fight paying the taxes when ultimately they're only making the profit in the first place because they're outsourcing their costs to the American people in the name of, especially in the case of Walmart, where you got people who are literally getting their health care from the government because they're living below the poverty line, or they're even, they're going to charities and soup kitchens to eat. And the company itself gets tax breaks for behaviors that they're not actually engaged in. They're not creating those kind of jobs. And if they, it wouldn't take that much effort to do so.
And I defy anybody to answer this question.
Yeah.
Businesses are always screaming that they're paying too much in tax.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, though, you'll hear people, the economists, tell you that businesses don't pay tax. So which way is it? They're lying to us one way or the other, if not both. And as far as bar goes, let me get this in and get out. As far as bar goes, it's obstruction of justice, it's abuse of power. It's the same thing with Munchkin and the tax returns. And here's the message, Democrats. Get off your ass. Start the impeachment. Quit being wussies. Grab your man panties and cinch them up nice and tight. And let's get on with this, because I'm telling you, I'm warning you right now. We're the ones that put you there for a reason. And I can promise you, if you do not do your constitutional duty that we elected you to do, we will come after your seats. We will primary you, and we will flip you right the hell out. We are sick and tired of this. The Constitution's in danger. Our way of lives are in danger. We're so close to fascism, it stinks. And if you're going to sit there and be timid and keep being little wussies about this, then we're going to have to get some other people in there, because I'll tell you right now, we've got more than enough. When you trace down that NRA money through Cohen, and you trust the Russian money and the meeting in the Seychelles with Prince and the connections to the Saudis, and I mean, there's the stack of stuff that we can convict these people on, the whole criminal corrupt syndicate that he's got up there. I'm telling you right now, I want to see next week, I want to see some people go to jail. Quit pussyfooting around and let's get real about this. And I love you, Hal. Thanks for letting me rant,
absolutely. I appreciate it, Ike. Thanks for calling in. You know how I feel about I'm more for the slow roll, because I think that aggravation that grows has to grow from the bottom up, and still impeachment is at 20% in the nation, and it's got to be at 40% before it actually filters into any real movable thing. Now, I think what's going to happen is the Democrats are playing are playing footsie on purpose with this. They're acting like they don't plan on doing it, and they don't want to do it, but you're making me do it. Look at the language from Nancy Pelosi. Look, he's self-impeaching. We don't want to do this. We would rather be doing other stuff, but he's making us do it. That's not them avoiding it. That's them messaging it. And as much as, again, who's the message for? Is it for Democrats? No, we're already on fire about this. We get it. It's for the independents and some of those bleedable Republican voters that exist out there. And we may not think that that's strategically necessary, and we might think that the majority of the country is ready to act on it and stuff, but they frankly are not. And that's part of the strategy. I think they're ultimately going to. File for impeachment to get the paperwork, but they want to give these guys enough of a shovel to dig so deep that they can go, was there any other way we could have gotten the information we needed? No. What in any way? So they are basically battening down the hatches on the messaging. I think they could be better at the affirmative messaging, but they are handling the defensive messaging on it fairly well right now. So that's the tough part. I think and there are people like Elizabeth Warren who are going to be the vanguard on all this. And so they will be, to create this kind of messaging back and forth. There have been, I don't doubt that there's been a meeting like, look, you take the affirmative side, I'll take the negative side, and we'll try to push some of these numbers in a better direction, and see whose languaging on it works out the best. I don't doubt that there's a conversation happening on it. I think there needs to be strategy based on it more than just conversations. But I appreciate where you're coming from, and I completely agree. We're almost to a break, but I think, do we have another caller, Lady B? I think there might be another one on there. Maybe not.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Nico. How are you? Who do we have?
What's up? All right, we got Mike.
Cool. Hey, Mike. Are you there? Hey, Mike. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Hal?
I'm good.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm here. Hey, I couldn't agree more with that guy Ike.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that guy is whistling my song. But
we love Ike. Yes.
Hey, this is what I want to bring up, and kudos to Ike. But I just want to say, this is what I want to bring up because I don't hear anybody talking about it. So you had all these people around Trump that went to jail, and you got these 14 investigations going on at the same time. So now we got this 2020 election coming up here fairly soon. Who is going to be stupid enough to be his campaign manager to run this thing? And then on top of that, the people around the campaign manager, and then also, does the Trump administration feel like they got carte blanche because now they don't have a special counsel investigation going on, so then 2020 they could do whatever they want? I mean, what's the deal with this? What's your opinion on that?
There has been a bunch of the people, basically anybody in the Trump administration that you have seen, over the last 2 years that have gone down for either racist tweets or obvious criminal activity that within the administration, or like missing, getting briefed on stuff they didn't legally have the right to be briefed on and had to be broomed from the administration. All those people, Brian Pascal and all those people, they're running the Trump campaign now. So basically anybody that we're like, oh, that guy got booted, that guy got dumped, they're all out the window now. I'm going to look up right now who the current key people. So Brad Pascal is the campaign manager right now. Michael Glassner is the campaign committee manager. Kayleigh McEnany is the national press secretary. They've staffed up. Laura Trump is working on it. But Pascal was the guy who ran the sort of the internet wing of stuff, which is all tied up in WikiLeaks and in the Russian side of the WikiLeaks scandal. He's going to be the primary dude. You're going to see mainly internet pushes from them and internet troll style languaging, because that's what he does. So believe me, there are people lined up to run this because they think he's going to win, and they're betting on two things. They're betting on the American public, believing in this guy and either in force or behind the scenes agreeing with what he does, even if they don't agree with what he says. You hear a lot of that languaging. And on the other hand, the Democrats fighting so much amongst themselves that anybody's 10-point lead like Biden has will be softened so much it will be within the margin of error, and they will be able to either gain the Electoral College again or steal it outright. That's the plan. No question. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for the call, though. I appreciate it. And I think it might have been a first-time caller for you, so thanks for calling in. We'll be back right after this. Chicago Electric Bicycle, I thought you were a Bernie supporter. Isn't he old and white? Sean Hannity will be his campaign manager. Well, effectively in the media. I think you're not wrong, LaTanya. Jail the Sacklers. Couldn't agree more. It's a crime in and of itself of the media that people don't know their name as much, because these people are almost single-handedly responsible for the opioid epidemic. They are criminals of the worst order. I'm just going to watch 2020 like I watch Game of Thrones, not going into it at all as if I know what will happen. I think that's wise, Ellie. I can't imagine Biden going up against Trump again winning. I can. I mean, I can also picture Harris doing it. I like Harris a lot for her ability to take him on. Maybe Vincent was a cat on someone's keyboard.
Hal, you got 2 more calls, by the way.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. We'll be doing a post show today as well. I've got I got a show tonight at Petey's, in Midnight Petey's place in Sepulveda in Reseda. It's like a bar the Karate Kid would play if he had a band. It's a cool place though. But we play late tonight. At midnight, so I don't have to rush off anytime soon, so we'll be able to do
30 minutes or 30 seconds.
30 minutes. Okay, you got it. Thanks. I'll just keep talking.
30 minutes from now, we're gone.
Thanks. HSRPM, don't forget, and patreon.com/HalSparks. If you're new to the show and you don't watch the show regularly, thank you for joining us. We've got some new people in here. I appreciate that. Yeah. I didn't see Mar last night about Barr, but I will watch that. Tulsi Williamson 2020 best ticket for your buck. Oh, that's very sweet. They don't match at all.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
So we got 2 other callers. Let's get to them too, because usually when we get near the bottom of the show, it's either people who've been hanging on for a long time who are listeners, or trolls who want to say something and then jump off the air at the end of the show without ever getting their stuff called on them. So we'll see which they are. I don't know. We'll find out. Who do we have, Nico?
We have Dave.
Cool. Hey, Dave. Welcome.
Hey, Hal. I'm just finding some kind of interest in reading this story about where this judge threw this Chelsea Manning back in jail.
Right.
For refusing to testify on this WikiLeaks, and he's planning to keep her in jail until,
kind of indefinitely.
She agrees to testify.
Right.
And or until the grand jury's term expires in 18 months, and then also they impose fines that kick in at like $500 a day after 30 days and $1,000 a day after 60 days. Now, why is it with this Mueller investigation that they can kind of thumb their nose at at the Democrats and they're
basically, she basically
not getting any worries about getting put in jail.
Exactly. Well, that's the law applies. The law applies to her in a way that it doesn't apply to them. That's one of the reasons why everybody's jumping through their shirt finally about what Barr is doing, and why you're seeing some movement on the Republican side about this, where they're just like they find it embarrassing, or all these prosecutors, Democrat and Republican across the country, have wrote that letter was essentially because of exactly this thing, that the unequal application of the law based on strategic power is the very thing that democracies seek to solve in their existence. I mean, that's why you have a democracy in the first place. What was a king more than anyone was someone that could dole out death while protecting himself and his own from the same punishment. Effectively, that is what theocratic and monarchical rule is. And so this is what what we fight to keep from being established in this country, either by large, broad strokes like what Barr is doing, or by the drip, supreme executive concept that Cheney and Bush tried to push through. And by the way, you'll all the while see them complaining about Democrats, including Obama, like that their executive orders are somehow, them acting like a king and that we're treating them like a messiah, when most of them are kind of perfunctory, normal executions. Just like we've got, $100 million directed at a particular policy, and as president, I want the majority of that to go to this because I think that's what the voters want and that's what the polls are telling me. That's effectively what an executive order does. It's like yes, this goes to a broad area, but there's a specific problem that we're seeing from this height that we have to deal with first, with the other information that I have. That's what an executive order is actually for. But this president's just doing it,
Let me get on the side so you can get to the other guy.
I appreciate that. Totally a good point. Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, Chelsea's, they're applying a law to her that, in a way that maybe, it's legitimate. If she's not going to testify, this is how it happens. Especially if you're a felon that was put in jail for this kind of stuff in the first place, it's a violation of your parole and your release. She was actually commuted. Her sentence was commuted. So I don't know what the law is around a commuted sentence like that. If there's a secondary aspect that's like parole, or you end up as a convicted felon, you're affected by this behavior more so, or if this is just a standard like witness level. If it is, the irony that basically Mnuchin should be getting this on the same scale of the money that he has in his life. He should be in jail getting, a $25,000 fine daily like Nadler had brought up. Let's get to this last caller, though, because I want to make sure we get to that. Who do we have? Who's that?
Hello, it's Steve from the Gold Coast.
Oh, hey, Steve. Look at that.
Hello,
how are you? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, great. Thanks for taking my call. I guess 2 points, because you unwrapped a lot here, but I know you're coming to the end here.
Yes.
In certain case, I think that the Democratic Party, especially the DNC, should concentrate on one thing more so than anything else, and that is that, whoever ends up being the nominee, that we get the message across to people out there. You know what? The object here is to defeat Trump, not to go and have a temper tantrum if your candidate doesn't win. Because it's certainly the case that it's going to be that somebody's going to scream hell about the fact that, the system wasn't as fair as they think it should be in this process of getting a nominee. And we have to avoid what happened last time, where people just decided to take their ball and go home, take their glove and go home, and then the rest of us were left playing short. And that's the message I think that the DNC needs to get out there. So that's point number one. Point number two, and this is where we may disagree, because under the heading that a broken clock is right twice a day, I do think that heading forward, given the fact that we know that, as many as 40% of manual labor jobs may be disappearing in the next 25 years, it's not entirely irresponsible to suggest that our immigration policy should reflect that reality. We have never had an altruistic immigration policy. It's always been a utilitarian. The people that came in here during the height of immigration in the 19th and 20th century came in because we needed them to fill a niche in our workforce.
Sure.
And
it's just that niche has changed.
It's time that our immigration
Right, yeah.
Exactly. And it's time that our immigration policy reflected. And I don't think, again, this is not about saying we just cut off everybody who doesn't have an advanced degree from being able to come to America, but we do adjust the policies somewhat so that we recognize the changing nature of the workforce.
Yeah, I agree, again, but it's a matter of how you actually accomplish it. And how you present it, that matters as far as the value of the country. And I think what Trump is doing is doing it in a brash and slapdash way, which, quite frankly, again, I think is appealing to more voters than people will admit. That's the unfortunate part. You have to be able to speak openly about it. And by the way, most of that stuff that you're talking about is handled in the comprehensive immigration bill that's been languishing in Congress for a decade. That has either been withheld because, in the case McConnell won't let it come to the floor, or scuttled by individual senators, which have the ability to put anonymous holds on both bills and people getting put in administration positions. And I like.
And you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right. And because we need to recognize that the motivations behind what I'm talking about differ very much so than what you have coming from Donald Trump.
Yes.
He wants to couch it in language that seems like it's appealing to a rational argument. But in reality, the people who back this sort of thing really have an agenda whereby, you know what, there are too many people who have brown skin coming to this country,
Yes.
and that's what we want to keep from happening.
Right.
That's their motivation. Mine is a more rational one, but so.
That's right. Absolutely. And there's a point, where they're like, we don't mind the uber rich of some of these people coming from these other countries, because the concept is that these people are basically Western to begin with, and that there's no difference but for some clothing between the head of Monsanto and a Saudi prince in their mind. Or a Brazilian criminal pork producer, or the head of a Mexican telecom. But on the worker level, there's a huge difference. And that's what they're fighting. That's their view, I think. And you're absolutely right. I appreciate the call, Steve. It's always good to have you on here. It's always a good show. Like if only we had Nashville Carlin, we would have knocked out the entire our entire core of the arguments that go on between here. And I think that's, we should shoot for that at some point, like a round table, me and those three folks calling in. I would also like to say, I don't know what the factor is like for other shows on the network as far as before and after us. I don't know, because it's not my experience having been on their shows. Usually when I'm a guest, there's not callers on the line or whatever. But ladies, within the sound of my voice, we've only got a couple minutes left in this show or whatever. But think of this in the future, that we would like to hear your voice. I know as a dude that the concept is that my gender and genitalia are somehow overrepresented in these circumstances. I can't do anything about my gender or whatever. I can just try to contribute to my society because I choose to. But I am offering what I can do to be like a welcome mat to those of you that would like to call in and state your piece on stuff, especially when we have stuff which we didn't even get to today, but we will as they play out in the courts, the anti-abortion laws, the anti-choice laws that are being pushed in major states in this country, to eventually try to work their way up to undermining Roe v. Wade, which protects more than abortion rights, for the record, but that never gets talked about. That conversation needs, and by the way, women don't have to be the only ones who care about that issue as well. I'm not saying that men can't call in and have that opinion. I don't think that's the case. I think men can have an opinion on it. It's just ironic to me that the only opinion that seems to be focused on when men have an opinion about it are the ones who are against a woman's right to choose. For the record, there's a ton of us out here that support a woman's right to choose. And there may even be people who are technically pro-life, but believe a woman should have the right to choose, and that every other opportunity should be provided for that life within the realm of the safety of the mother and the viability of the fetus, and the ability for us as a country to support children in their development, regardless of the economic position of their parents. A child is not to blame for being born because their parents were poor any more than Donald Trump can pat himself on the back for being born rich. That's a conversation that needs to happen as well. We'll see you next week. Everybody in the chat room, stick around. We're going to do a little post show at infotainmentwars.com. Otherwise, in Chicago, stay tuned for Dick Hay. Thank you, Lady B. Thank you, Nico. Thank you, everybody in Chicago. We'll see you next week, and Johnny Million will be with us. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Well, there we go. It didn't start off well, but somehow, I don't know why the tie line just decides to work at some point. It just maybe the hackers in Russia just give up. Is that what happens? They just stop messing with us? Have you guys seen all the DDoS attacks that have been going on? So much so that the Trump administration had to sign an executive order this week about interference in our attacks on our electrical grid and on businesses. Did you see all that stuff? That was going on under the radar. I'm gonna hang up with Chicago. Thank you, Lady B. Thanks, everybody. Just so that I don't get hit in the head with a with harmonica music in that regard. So hold on. I'm going to. I wish I could bring this up on this monitor, but I can't. It's just annoying. Damn it. I don't understand. How you guys doing, chat room? By the way, you can have your opinion. You just can't make a law about that opinion. Well, I don't know. If your opinion is that women should have the right to choose, and you can make a law about it, shouldn't you? You know what I mean? That's like saying the men who could have voted to scuttle this bill in Alabama shouldn't, because or shouldn't have voted at all. I don't know quite. That just seems weird. Earbuds out. Thank you, Carl. Yes, that's a good idea. I was toying with that idea, but sometimes it's the only way I know that audio is going properly into the thing. So, Russians don't like your show. How? I hope not. I hope they. I hope the Russian government hates it. The Russian people, I got no problem. I got no problem with them. So, if you're a man who says, hey, it's her body and she gets to choose, that's not a threat. If you don't have a uterus and you're going to put chains on it, you're going to hit resistance. Well, I would agree in that regard. Gotcha. Okay. Can we just acknowledge that Roe v. Wade is a privacy opinion? Exactly. That's the other thing. That's the appeal I don't think they understand. That the Roe v. Wade is not the pro-abortion, allow women to have abortion on demand and women can, kill their baby outside the womb nonsense. And the suggestion that that's what's going on is cruel and a lie, and is effectively the Terry Schiavoing of women and babies in distress, families in distress. So, and the idea that most people, like, right up to the moment that they're going to have a child, would suddenly just decide to abort it, like, on a whim, shows a view, like a misogynistic view and a hatred of women that is just off the scale. And the idea that a doctor, and ironically, presumably a male doctor, would be assisting her in just kind of getting rid of a viable baby, within days of birth, because, I just don't feel like having a baby anymore. Like, the idea that that's how they think it goes down is just madness in and of itself. Hold on. Supporting bodily autonomy, yes. But yeah, Roe v. Wade is about, keeping your decisions between you and your doctor, Who's that? Thanks. Hello. Yeah. And by the way, I think, did I see right? Hold on. Yeah, I think we got, I can't tell from this. I think we might have gotten another Patreon subscriber during that hour. So thank you. Patreon.com/HalSparks. If you're in here, if you're in the chat, and you like the show regularly or whatever, $5 a month, it's invisible. Just let it happen. It helps us out immensely. We're trying to basically save up to replace the tie line system here in between me and the station, so that we don't have to worry about this. And I've got a traveling version of it that's actually more reliable. Or eventually, God knows, have a studio where we just do the show from, like the Pac-Mans of the world. These guys, I mean, obviously, both TYT and Pac-Man and all the left wingers that do have shows like this or whatever get large paychecks from liberal donors or whatever. We don't do that either, because I haven't sought it out, nor would I. But being a kind of a communal thing is meaningful, I think. So I don't want to get too KCRW on you, but that's how it works. So this is let's see. This is the new blood libel. Yeah, I would agree. It's becoming a state-by-state thing. Maybe states that are pro-choice can provide services that reach out to people that live in anti-choice states. Yeah, the problem with that, Susan, is that means that only people of means can have support systems that do that, and especially in states where they don't allow for the safety of the life and viability of the mother. Then a woman who is poor is, by the way, in a higher chance of dying during her pregnancy than a woman with means. And then you've got the only way that she can save her own life is to go to another state, which she may not have the ability or the funds to do. And especially when you group states together, because and it's not like we patchwork like a checkerboard where there's a blue state bordering a red state, every one, or a pro-choice state and an anti-choice state bordering each other. She may have to travel hundreds of miles and stay someplace and have services that may take multiple days, which means, having time off from her job, money that she doesn't have to even do it in the first place. And that's presuming she doesn't have any children to start with. And a good portion of therapeutic abortions that happen are women who already have kids, who have, their life is in danger because of complications in the pregnancy after their second or third child in some cases. So, a poor woman in that circumstance finds herself in in very dire straits, and allowing there to be unequal application of a right in the country, which is specifically medical privacy between your doctor and the ability for doctors to do legal services, no matter what somebody thinks about it. And this is, we're always going to have a debate about beginning of life and end of life care in this country. It is a new circumstance. We are a growing country. This is a democracy. People have the right to say it. And there is a pro-life position that isn't all just, these angry white men in the South doing this or whatever. They represent angry women as well of many colors. There's Catholic Hispanics who are anti-abortion, period, end of story. There are Black and Asian anti-abortion activists. They exist, not in the numbers, obviously, in the South, but they are there. And their voice is that they believe that life begins at conception and that any fetus is viable at any point, and no one has the right to terminate that pregnancy. There is obviously a line that has to be drawn legally and biologically and philosophically in the country, and that takes debate, that takes conversation. But that's not what's happening. What's happening now is the argument is being pegged as abortion on demand up to and including moments after birth on the left, and women not even having the availability of contraceptives to stop a pregnancy from starting on the right. Those groups exist. And in many ways, they've been the loudest parts of the argument over the last 25, 30 years, and they've just gotten louder. And meanwhile, the majority of Americans believe in both the availability of therapeutic abortions in the case of saving the mother or a non-viable fetus, especially, and an abortion of choice prior to the first trimester, for example. But they're changing the laws into the awareness. The Alabama law is very specific in that once a woman is aware she's pregnant, that's considered a viable pregnancy. So what you're going to have is a situation where women are getting abortions, are going, they're taking RU-486, they're ordering it off the internet and taking it just in case, the minute they miss a period, in case they happen to be, because they can't take a pregnancy test and find out because that makes them legally viable. Like, I don't know how they're going to do the legal case on this, where they just hunt women down and go, we need to see your receipts for CVS. Did you buy a pregnancy test? Where is it? It's crazy. What if condoms were being attacked? Well, the argument is why they think condoms are different than the pill is that they believe that the pill is like RU-486, that it stops implantation of a fertilized egg in the uteral wall, which it doesn't. That's not how it works. Some do, but not all. But they believe that follows the conception idea, and that condoms don't. They are before conception. And sperm aren't viable on their own, no matter it, because they live and die in your testicles, whether or not you use them. So the argument that, like, well, you're murdering all the swimmers or whatever would be the same argument as saying any woman who has a period with an unfertilized egg is having an abortion. Which is an absurdity on both fronts. So that's why condoms don't get factored into the conversation. from a material standpoint. There is no heart at 6 weeks, so the law is wrong and can easily be struck down on that basis. I agree, Maureen. That will be the case where it will be struck down. But then the problem is they're trying to move that back to what is it a heartbeat that creates, since a heartbeat is not necessarily the end of the life, because you can die, but still have brain activity, or you can have a heart attack, your heart can stop. So while your heart is stopped, you're technically dead, but they can revive you. Does that technically mean that life before the heart beats qualifies as life? Watch them make that argument. Guarantee it. I don't want to give them any ideas, but that's where it's coming from. Condoms used to be sold for prevention of disease only, right? Well, that's because the idea is that you only used condoms if you were sleeping with someone you were not intending to procreate with. Just a coincidence that everything considered abortifacient is a method of birth control for women, while condoms require consent of the man. Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that's where the argument's going to come from. I'm not taking a side in that part of the argument. I'm just telling you what. Well, I am taking a side, but I'm not for that part of the argument. I'm just saying that's what the counter is going to be and why it comes up, and why I think condoms don't qualify. This is just a material definition. Alabama lawmakers insane. I would agree. Is it the mother's blood going through the clump of cells? It is the mother's blood going through the clump of cells. True, but it's the father's DNA. I mean, you could argue that. Force the sperm man pay child support regardless. Boom. Yes, but that also means access, Ellie. And if you and in the case of rape and incest, for example, the problem is, and this is why there needs to be an exception at all times for rape and incest, when they can, and that the laws around rape and incest have to be strengthened, is because some rapists, we have this view of rapists as kind of, jumping out of the bushes with a stocking cap on. There are rapists, obviously, the majority of them are, qualify as date rape, but there are also what's called stalker rape. And those are people who are trying to, they've targeted a specific woman because they have designs on being part of her life. And so if they can impregnate her in that act, and the jail sentence in the state for rape, or sexual assault is only 7 years or something like that, and then they get out and they have legal rights to that child, some of these nutbags, that might be worth it to them. So there needs to be laws around the removal of the father in those cases attached to that as well, I think. I'm concerned Dem 2020 students think the way to fight these draconian abortion laws is to go the opposite extreme. They want to overturn the Hyde Amendment, but I think that will lose moderates. I agree. I don't think they're going to go that way. I think they're going to, I think most of them will take the safe, rare, and legal approach. If they want to use the Bible, doesn't it say that life begins when a baby takes its first breath? Yeah, but the Bible also says you can dash the heads of your enemy's babies on the rocks. So I wouldn't go there for, shoring up the argument. Oh my God, how that gives me the creeps just hearing skin literally calling. Well, that's true though. That's the problem. That's why, like, when they say there shouldn't be an exemption for rape and incest because because the child, it isn't the child's fault who their parent is. That you hear that argument a lot. That's not what that law is for. It's to stop the conception argument in the first place. If they don't think they can do that, it lowers the chance they will attempt it. It's to eliminate that as a motivator in rape attacks. So, let's see. I think we need to concentrate on holding the line against assault on Roe. I think, well, absolutely. It is more than a clump of cells. I know I had one, did not even know I was pregnant. Yeah, I think the language around that is damaging too. This is all about controlling women. I've been non-consensual. I've been having non-consensual sex since I was 15 by choice. I knew what I was doing. I was concerned about women who do not have options. What do you mean? Oh, non-consequential. Good grief. I misread that. I apologize. Non-consequential. Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, I think this is backlash against, in many ways, against contraceptive availability in the sexual revolution. I mean, I think they've been fighting this fight in the same way. These are the same people who've been fighting the Civil Rights Act, through other means continually since the 60s. The Dixiecrats that became Republicans, and hated hippies during the 60s, same group of people fighting the same two fights ever since ever since Roe, ever since the Civil Rights Act. These are their two big culture war points. And there's, you can't openly dismiss them at base as monsters, obviously the racist ones you can, I suppose, but in terms of like people who are pro-life, who have a genuine belief about that, however misguided, this idea, like the languaging around it, can be inversely cruel, and I think and overtly dismissive, and I think undermines the argument in the first place. I think the better argument a lot of times is, if you really cared about life, why aren't you supporting, Head Start, childcare, school lunches, educational programs, the support structures for having a child? You obviously don't care about those because once they're born, it's market forces will determine the life of the child. If we have to kill it later in a, via lethal injection, that's just the cost of doing business, but it should be forced to be born like that. It's just an absurdity. So I think the issue should be, if you're pro-life, prove it, support life, the living child, before it's even born, before even the concept of conception occurs, but you don't, so shut up. Hal, in case you missed my hot take, these abortion laws are voter suppression laws. That, well, it's an interesting take. How do you mean? Comprehensive education and readily affordable access to contraception is the only thing that prevents abortion. Agreed. I think that's a big part of it. It won't prevent it entirely, though. Nothing will. But there are a big portion of people who believe that if a woman, in spite of those things, has an abortion, that she should die trying. They believe that because they view her as a murderer. I have keyboard, and from a left point of view, people view people who would allow that to happen to a woman who has to have a therapeutic abortion or has an abortion in the first trimester, who attempts to do that she deserves to die. That the people on the right believe that about her, that makes them a murderer because they killed her. So these people on the right think you're killing the baby. On the left, they think you're killing the woman. Obviously, the truth is in the middle and needs to be hashed out. It's not. You can't, especially around issues like this. It's where the bumper sticker philosophy concepts fail the most. And so, it is something that will have to be worked out, and it is going to be worked out in the courts. I think largely, again, safe, rare, and legal is the smart way to go. Availability of safe contraceptives. There need to be advances in contraception, both for men and women. I think a male contraceptive would be fantastic. I'm 100% for it. A lot of talk has been said about vasectomies lately. The problem is reversal of it. Once you decide you want to have kids, it's like women having their tubes tied until such time. This idea that you would ask that of women is absurd, so asking it of men is kind of ridiculous. Also, that quote I keep hearing about, like men are 100% responsible for all unwanted pregnancies, is false. Couples often have unwanted pregnancies. Both people are involved. Both people make the decision most of the time. In adult relationships where an abortion has occurred, it's because men and their partner have gone, we're not ready, or we can't, or this isn't ours, and we need to, we need to take care of this before it grows into something that we do need to take care of in that regard. It's, and they make these decisions, they do make them together, and I think that's not part of the conversation right now. Or in the case of Donald Trump, where you just pay some dude to pay the chick to have one. This issue alone causes several family members to vote Republican, even though they are Democrats in belief. I agree. And again, this is what happens when you just blatantly vilify, or you think that all pro-lifers are anti-woman, which they aren't. They are not. They're just really passionate about the idea that life begins at conception and that a baby deserves a chance. And you got to talk to them within those, confines. And you may run up against something, but you don't. Once you hit that barrier, calling them a monster or allowing them to call you a monster, is not the answer about this issue. It just isn't. I mean, this is very complicated. So, sorry, missed that part. In my family, one of my grandmothers did not survive an illegal abortion. Yeah. Been pointed out that Alabama doesn't have one law supporting paid family leave. Oh, Alabama's, was it 49th in state illiteracy, child poverty, statistics are through the roof. Like, this is not a state that cares about children, at all. That's the thing. What about test tubes, in vitro, and surrogates? Well, there's certain Catholics don't believe that should happen. The Catholic Church has issues about this. There's a lot of Hispanics out there who end up very conservative on this side because they have those feelings about, that even storing fertilized eggs that don't get completely used as a form of abortion. I think that's absurd, but there you go. That's a genuine belief that they have. Vasal gel and contraline are reversible vasectomies. Actually, vas occlusion. A gel is injected into the vas to block it off. A second flushes it out to reverse it. There's been. I don't know what the efficacy is of that across the board. But I think most people, especially when we talk about vasectomy, they talk about the surgical vasectomies. So, and oddly enough, clogging up your tubes is no better than tying them off most of the time in the body. So, I think more than likely a spermicidal contraceptive would more than likely be the answer. It's just funny to me that the anti-immigrant folks, the most vocal pro-life, they use the argument, would you open up your home to an illegal but expect women to forfeit their uterus? Right. I don't know that that's a parallel argument because they view living, walking, talking human beings with agency differently than they view an unborn child. They won't hear that argument at all. Storing eggs equals abortion. What the actual? Yeah, that is one of the arguments. That's one of the pro-life arguments. Which would mean, by the way, that every fertilized egg that, let's say you go to a clinic and you fertilize some eggs and you try to, when you're trying to get pregnant because you have issues with it, and they implant those eggs and some of them fail and some of them don't. Each one of them would have to get a social security number, and human rights on a massive scale. And I don't know what happens if the egg isn't viable once it is implanted. Like, what the process? Do you get a death certificate as well? Like, once you follow it out, ad absurdum, it falls apart. But that's definitely something that they're arguing. I don't mean to pick on Catholic members in this chat, but the Catholic religion is just a joke. EO, relax. The older I get, the more Roe seems like a reasonable compromise, but clearly conservatives don't agree. I agree, Craig. Well, the thing about Roe is that it protects you on a bunch of different fronts, not just on choice about abortion. And you get rid of that. Like, it's amazing to me that how many of the people don't recognize that getting rid of Roe is a step toward RFID chips being implanted in you by the government, because it lowers the right for the government to not say what you can do with your body and how. Original version of Vasal gel was developed in India called Risig and has been successfully tested over about 20 years, but not available to foreigners. That's interesting. Tying tubes is not the same as a vasectomy. It's a major surgical procedure, is outpatient procedure. Yeah, but it's still invasive surgery, and you literally are getting the vas deferens cut and tied off. That's the parallel I would make. My mom worked for a urologist for 12 years. I grew up going to a urologist's office every day after I went to the YMCA during the summer while my mom worked. Yeah, they would have to have embryonic daycare. But that's the thing. They're not even, if they're not willing to take care of a child once it's born, what At what point are they going to be financially okay? Here's talk about the unintended consequences aspect of this. So the Republicans don't even want to provide childcare and after school programs and school lunches and all that kind of stuff for living, walking, talking, breathing, studying, pooping, peeing, screaming, laughing, crying children. They don't want to do that for them. But so let's say you have an issue where you've got 6 fertilized eggs because you and your partner are trying to get pregnant, and you've gone through the process. You have 6 of these fertilized eggs, but you can only afford to implant one of them. The other 5 is now the state responsible for implanting them in your or someone else's uterus? Or do they have to find a place for that? Or are you just charged with 5 counts of reckless indifference or depraved indifference or second-degree murder because you don't implant them in? There's no thought into what they're talking about in that regard. But, I mean, that's what it would have to materially be. Once you start establishing something like that, that's how it have to work out. So, that part boggles my mind. Thank you, Susan, for joining us. Appreciate it. Yes, Roe protects privacy, period. That's what it's about. GOP doesn't provide money for any program that doesn't feed their coffers. Agreed. I don't agree with forced vasectomies the same way I view forced abortion pregnancies. It's a matter of consent. Exactly. Yeah, you don't argue that women deserve affirmative consent by denying affirmative consent to somebody else. And I think most people are doing that sort of sarcastically or ironically. The same way you hear that if men got pregnant, there'd be abortion on demand at every drive-through Starbucks, right? That kind of, you hear those jokes or whatever. Which obviously, if men had babies, men would be women in those cases, and they would feel differently probably about the process of getting pregnant in the first place and carrying a child in the second place. So it would probably be equal. And you could argue that if men were the ones getting pregnant and women didn't, then over time or instantly, the attitudes towards pregnancy would change. And if a woman didn't want her partner pregnant or didn't want to care for the child, it would just invert the sex roles. It doesn't mean anything. I think the idea is that, the availabilities, I think if you view it, condoms you can get anywhere, but you needed a prescription for a long time for the pill, for example. Now, the pill has a different effect on the human body, and there's hormonal effects, and there's a reason for that or whatever, but that's kind of the baseline. And women and men can both buy condoms, and both of them can, choose to make that the reason they have, a limit on when they have sex. They only have sex if there's a condom involved. In those cases. So, we are talking 100% about consensual sex. Jesus dressed the same as all the traditional Jews of his time. The outliers were the Jews who dressed like Romans. That's interesting. I don't know what that's tied to in the situation, but yes. As far as short versus long robes is the idea. I know a person who eats 7 meals a day. That seems excessive to me. I believe in forced colonoscopies. Feels so good to be cleaned on. If men could get pregnant, they would not need women at all, just for the eggs, right? If every human being could get pregnant, the world would be an entirely different place, right? Exactly. I mean, that's one of those it's more like that's a sarcastic argument, not a viable argument. Whatever. Roe v. Wade expanded right to privacy. There was another case that introduced the viability test. In my opinion, that's the one that will actually be tested. Have to find someone with standing. Yes, I agree, Pamela. If men could get pregnant, they would be hermaphroditic, right? Maybe that is the problem with these GOP men. They're all backed up. Frankly, I don't think men have any place in this conversation unless the woman lets him in. Well, okay. Here's a possible argument. A couple is together and they decide to have a child, or they fertilize some eggs together, for example. The man can't carry those eggs. Only the woman can. She starts carrying one. They break up. She decides, I'm not going to have this baby, and she aborts it. But he's got 5 eggs left over, and he'd have to hire a surrogate to do that. Does she pay for the surrogate? Or just the hell with him, he doesn't deserve to have a child? In the same way that if a guy, had a vasectomy and didn't tell his wife and promised they would get pregnant, and she spends 5 to 10 years trying to get pregnant, thinking it's her, worrying about it or whatever, and you found out one day that he'd actually that couldn't have children and knew it, does she owe him anything because of the time lost that she could have been having a child? And that's without even the viability of the child argument. Hal, are you in a garage? I'm tired of talking about abortion. I'm in. Yes, we are. The studio here is converted, and yes, and again, we're not going to solve this conversation. Unity has fallen out of the top 20 nations regarding mortality of childbirthing mothers. Yep, no appeal over that. That would be my argument. What we should focus on first. Welcome back, Carl. I'll be interested to see more of the modern era on CTM. It's really good and has been renewed. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we were almost getting to the point where we're talking about sex, which used to be an interesting conversation, and now has just become horrifying. We can't talk about sex. Just the very discussion of it lacks consent. Even the asking of consent brings up sex without consent to talk about sex. Oh, no. Just because I'm an adult doesn't mean you can do and say things about me around. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat and looking at stuff. You believe a man, particularly a stranger, has the authority to tell that woman that she needs to do with her body? No. What do you mean? If a woman wants a baby, she has to physically go through the process of pregnancy and labor, which takes a huge cost on the physical body. Where would the babies come out of the man? The urethra, right? On Garage Talk Radio. Yeah, Garage Talk Radio. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't. I actually am a frozen carbonite. Yeah, Republicans are pro-birth, but not pro-child. Period. Yes, I would agree. He just walked away and could. But what if he doesn't? What if he's invested in the birth of that child? I mean, I understand you're an absolutist about that part of it, but I'm telling you that's part of the argument that comes up. "50 years down the line, this problem will be laughed at." I agree. I had to deal with that choice, and I should be able to do that without outside interference from strangers. Gotcha. Because when it comes time to support the kid, I'm the one who does that. Okay. Not the guy who walked away or the protesters. Right. But again, this presumes the walk away guy as an element to that. You know, as an assertive part of this. We're not talking about the walk away guy. We're talking about the invested guy. We're talking about the guy who was planning on being a father and is the father of the child. And, whether or not he has any say whatsoever in the existence of that child once it reaches a certain viability point. And in the decision making, because it's inside the mother, but at what point That's what I'm saying. There's a conversation. I'm not talking about the beginning of it. I'm not talking about in the first trimester at all. This would be the second trimester argument. There you go. Oh, by the way, this is such a fun conversation too. I'm glad we're having it, but anyways, blue patches like this one is what you get when you sign up at Patreon, and when you wear it at a show or you bring it with you. You can put it on a pocketbook or you can glue it to a card. I don't care. And bring it to a show of mine, any show. You get to bring in a guest for free. So the upcoming shows in Oxnard and in Irvine, for example. I know we've got some Blue Patch Brigade members who are going to be there, and they get to bring somebody with them. If they already have a friend who comes with them that pays, they can, bring another person. It just works out that way. It's pretty cool. So think about the Patreon if that suits your fancy. I was just saying that there are some guys out there who don't know women have. Oh, they think the baby comes from the place where the pea comes from. Yeah, well, those are stupid people, and we don't have to concern ourselves with them unless they're in office. So, yay, Zelda, I'm glad. So those of you, I just sent out a bunch of the Patreon stuff. Those of you that have gotten them, can you just sound off in the chat so I know that you got them? Dude, the full moon last night was insane. I walked out and it was so bright to my right up in the sky. I was like, there's not a street lamp right there. Is that off the alley or something? It was so insanely bright last night. I'm like, no wonder everybody's crazy. I don't have any white shirts, EO. I'm sending you a gray one. I hope that's okay. Yeah. Kid of a father who walked away. That was his right. Did you like Benny? Of course. Let's see. Great. Now I gotta go back. Go for it, Carl. Benny Loco. Let's see. I just got home from a local Democratic fundraiser where Jan Schakowsky spoke. One thing she said was, sometimes we choose the mom, but sometimes the moment the moment, I see. Sometimes we choose the moment, but sometimes the moment chooses us, and that time is now. I've actually heard that phrase used in, I want to say the earliest version of it was probably in a newsreel from the 30s. But it's a good phrase. Hola, Benny Loco. Thank you for coming. Just visiting. I can't work with a great. So, and thank you guys for the super chats today. I really appreciate it. And again, the show benefits more, I guess, ultimately from, that's what it was. Something did come up. We did have a new patron. I don't know. It's just not saying it. It's giving me a notification that, Thomas Lunzer joined us. I think that was the newest one. Well, thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. So if you've gotten your stuff from the Patreon, let me know, because it's my first time. I'm new to the whole Patreon thing, and I'm trying really hard to be, proper and businesslike about it and take care of it and make sure it's handled or whatever, and set up as many benefits to it as I possibly can for you guys. But again, I'm finding my way. It's amazing how some of these YouTube channel companies set up your Patreon for you, take a big chunk of it, and then just drive you to they'll provide the materials and all that kind of stuff, and it almost becomes like a fan club company like they had in the 80s, send off box tops and stuff like that. But anyways, and Singyu, this is an interesting thing. She goes, it was reported last week on PBS that the U.S. birth rate has hit a 32-year low, primarily due to contraceptive choices. This makes the economic argument for increased immigration, which is, by the way, one of the big reasons why they are fighting abortion as hard as and contraception and as hard as they can. Because what's effectively happening is first world countries are having fewer babies and fewer children. And so they need to get workers from other countries. We've heard this immigration concept. Japan has dealt with this. The United States deals with this. Canada and England have been talking about this a lot, because as more countries require more services, especially as they become wealthier, they have fewer children and meaning fewer workers to actually take that. So they bring in more immigration to do that, changes the shape of the country is the idea. And we've had that argument. One of the big reasons why they're pushing back against contraception and abortion is it makes it too easy for people to not have children born in America. That beyond the whole viability of the baby. Understand that there's a big Steve King wing of that argument, and that's exactly what she's talking about. I live Danny Davis' district, and he's fine, but we need a new, younger, more progressive person in office. Well, depends on that person. If they exist, people don't have enough houseboats to live in yet. I agree. They're holding on to their majority with a white knuckle grip, I suppose. How one note, the patch kind of smudged a bunch on the ink on the card. Oh, good to know. I appreciate that. Might have just written that quickly. Did it get on the patch? I'll send you another one if it didn't. It was definitely freshly printed. I made those hot off the presses. Although I did make a few more of them, so they've been sitting hopefully for a while. They won't smudge as much, I hope. Other than that, it's the printer, and I might have to get a different. Oh God, I'll have to get a new printer just to do the Patreon stuff. Every time I turn around. What's wrong with Danny Davis? Age is respected quality. Danny is 77 and moves really slow. He needs to retire. Moves? Wow. Well, Carrie, all ageism aside, young lady, the value of wisdom, I think, is something we take for granted to some degree, and the assumption that anybody that's been around a while is somehow therefore suspect is, there's a lot of Holocaust survivors that are very, very old that I think we would be wise to listen to. So this idea that some people just age out of their usefulness because time is a difficult one for me to swallow, considering it happens to everybody, and all these diverse young folks that you're seeing in the, offering these fresh ideas are eventually, if they stay in office, gonna be succumb to those very same things. And it doesn't mean their ideas are weaker or not worth still fighting for if they still haven't been implemented. It's on the patch. Thanks. Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll fix that. We'll send you another one. There's a recent book, Empty Planet, which argues that this plummeting birth rate is starting to go global and is increasing as prosperity and women's empowerment spreads across the globe. Tom, you're not wrong about that. And certainly the more women are educated and the more options people have and the more efficient production becomes, you don't need as many workers to do it. People have fewer children. And it's mainly the huge birth rates are in heavily impoverished areas where they don't have their retirement plan is effectively grandchildren. That's what their retirement plan is. You have enough people in the family where they take care of the grandparents, but eventually that growth rate to, this set of grandparents has two kids that end up being the grandparents of these kids that end up being grandparents of these kids. You end up having these rows of people who are, it's effectively what they say is going to ultimately kill Social Security, right? Which is not the case, but, and that's also where they say that the worldwide population will peter out around 9 billion and stay there because of this very fact, and maybe even start going down. Can we win against the vaping R? What do you mean? Denny's fine, but there are some seats that need new people, and him and Bobby Ryan are 2 in Chicago. Well, depends on who those new people are, Carrie. Someday all you young whippersnappers will be older than even I am, right? Almost all the Dem incumbents who didn't get elected in 2018 are going to be primaried, which is a mistake. I mean, we don't even have the Senate. We've had control of the House for 5 months, and they're going to be primaried. It's weird. Especially, it takes no guts whatsoever, honestly, to primary a Dem in these areas. It takes guts to primary and go after a Republican in a red district. Like, eating your own, I'm not impressed. I wasn't impressed before, and now that Trump's been in office for 2 years, I'm not impressed at all. As a matter of fact, I think, most of the time it's embarrassing. There's been a couple of wins and a lot of losses. There are old folks like all ages who haven't evolved past high school. I agree. There are also young people who haven't either. When you move away from the mic, you get quiet. I apologize. I will move it closer to myself. Old folks do get too set in their ways. I agree. And that's like saying young people don't take things, the long-term effects of their policies and ideas into account. So, no, they aren't to primary AOC because she's. No, they want to primary AOC because she's a troublemaker. I don't think anybody's going to primary AOC in any meaningful way. Welcome back, Can't Stop Lying. Always good to have you. By the way, look how many people have smashed likes. Not as many as could, but there's a bunch of like smashing that went on. They smashed the likes. There you go. AOC isn't a troublemaker. She's showing how to go after thugs. I agree. Yeah. It's the right kind of trouble. It's like telling Morrissey to be less far right. It's not going to happen. If I could only take out 2 Dem incumbents in the House from Illinois, it would be Lipinski and Sherry Bustos for terrible DCCC decisions. Brett Lipinski, I guess. So, yeah. So 50% of the Democrats you would take out of office would be women. Okay. He broke that contract. Later he used VC, but I'm back with grandkids. Nearly 50 with no grandkids yet. Mama knows. That's all I'm saying. I love young people, and young people love me. AOC is a teacher. I'm done with sending moderates to get clobbered by insane right-wingers. President Obama didn't run as a moderate at all, and his campaign was anything but scripted or soulless. I agree. I'm glad I get set in my ways as a liberal Democrat. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of, again, so many people think that they are somehow magic for their beliefs. Like, I'm liberal and I'm, Dan Lipinski, right. Thank you. I'm thinking of Washington State. They're like, I believe liberal ideas and liberal policies because I'm a good person. When in fact they were raised largely, completely surrounded by those ideas. And had they been raised to go to Jesus camp, they would have turned out completely differently. So. Vote young. Be good and do good. I think that's a better start. I'm not going to start endorsing ageism of any sort. If an elderly woman decides she wants to run for office because of her life experience, and if she's damn near doddering, but her care for humanity and her open-heartedness applies to the fact that she has, both an education and the life experience to make her valuable. I'm not going to rule her out just because she's old. What a stupid idea. What's not true, Ginger? I missed that. Sherry Bustos is hindering Marie Newman's chances to take out Dino Dan Lipinski. Help, please read what she is doing. He said, I'm not disagreeing with you in that point. I'm just pointing out the fact that when we talk about diversity, there's an element of you have to be willing to take the good with the bad. And if there's a woman in office, you've got to understand that her voice is the voice of a woman in that case, and it has value even if you disagree with it. I'm not even supporting her in that regard. I'm just saying, be best, right? Yeah, I think I will, and I will accept your support. Well, there you go, Maureen. I think that would be perfect. Those members are vulnerable if the caucus moves too far from those issues. Very possibly. I'm not big on Lipinski, and I did not vote for him last time. Okay. Like, yeah, Ginger's a grandma, is old enough to be a grandmother. Technically, she isn't one yet, but let's say she has a baby. One of her babies has a baby, and she ends up being a grandmother. I'm not gonna go, I'm voting for her. She's a grandmother. This is too old. We need some young blood in there. Like, that's, silly. I was raised by an insane GOP mother and went to Jesus camp. I'm 72 years young and always voted Democrat. Wanted to register as a socialist in 1968. Well, you're the outlier, Pamela. And I would give you credit for that behavior. That's what I'm saying. Like, that impresses me. It doesn't impress me if you grew up in a participation ribbon family, and you came to these belief systems, because of your surroundings, right? Grandma matriarchy would be nice every once in a while. I agree. Depends on who the grandmother is, obviously. But yes, Harry Boos has the right to support whomever she wants. She's strategic. That's my point. But she's not a terrible person for that move. You just disagree with her. And there's an important distinction there. There's a huge, huge distinction. It is incredible. Dan only voted for the Equality Act because he's afraid of losing to Marie because he only beat her by 1,600 votes. Oh, my God. He voted for the Equality Act. Only 1,600 votes is a wide margin in a district like that. It's pitiful on a national scale. We have to remember that the insulated world we see, Twitter or Facebook, is not the world of Democrats out there. Most Dems are much more centrist than the leftists we see online. I've been keeping track of elected officials since my mid-20s when I was working at CNN. I don't doubt it, and I think that might, and that's over 20 years of info. I agree, but you can literally be saturated with information and create confirmation bias on your own ideals because of that. It can happen. I'm just saying, calling both of those people awful humans for what they're doing, as opposed to just people you strategically or personally disagree with, when technically speaking, they support everything that you support within a small margin, but that makes them terrible people. That's a big deal. You have to factor that in. He doesn't believe in LGBT equality. Then why did he vote for the Equality Act? You can't really fight isms and support ageism, especially with women. I agree. Especially when women were denied a place in the workforce or in government for a very long time. And so there's a lag. So the women that actually came up through that and developed power in the latter stage of that, who are just now getting ground in that area, who actually have, who lived through that whole fight and know how that fight came out and all that, they're going to be older now. And they're going to be, ruled out because they're too old to run for office? I don't buy it. No Dems are more progressive across the... What? No Dems are more progressive across the board. What does that mean? Yeah, it sounds like a purity test, and it sounds dismissive of humanity. Like, it's crazy. I was raised with Catholic catechism classes, Little League Baseball, and Boy Scouts, and if I have atheist progressive thoughts, they are mine. I built my own damn self. Well, good. I agree. Then you would be the outlier in that circumstance. I'm not obviously not referring to you, Michael, in that regard. You know who I'm talking. He was the only House Dem who didn't co-sponsor the legislation. Okay. He voted for it. He may not have co-sponsored it because he didn't think it worked, or he disagreed with how it was, or he might have been a better way to do it. I don't know. What I do know is he voted for it. And if you're going to say that, if he didn't vote for it, I'd say you have a case for the awful person argument. You can say he's too centrist for you. You can say you differ on certain issues, but the dude voted for the Equality Act. I'm just saying. Yeah. I got beat up pretty bad supporting Hillary, trying to find libertarian Republicans and extreme progressives in 2020. It seems like a disaster. Yeah, well, that's the idea. And again, And by the way, you know, the delineation label-wise between progressive and liberal is just going to be a circular firing squad. It's just an absurdity. You will find it is too easy to find enemies within your own circle and use that as a politically agoraphobic excuse not to invest in the ideas outside. Why are you fighting for Dan Lipinski, Hal? I'm not fighting for Dan Lipinski. I'm fighting against the idea that people are awful who voted for legislation you believe in. The votes matter. The reason why someone votes for it does not. I agree. Because they are enacting the will of the people. Even if they individually might not agree fully with it, if the major consensus of the people around their district is that they're going to reflect that, even if they have a problem with it. That's what a representative government should be like. I don't like this, but the vast majority of the people I represent do, and they hired me to do that job. Love the Hal heavy sigh. I mean, honestly, and you know what, Carrie? It's probably because I'm an awful person. That's why. And by the way, this didn't start as a conversation about Dan Lipinski. This started with a conversation about your descriptive about Sherry. So don't move the goalpost on me. Yeah. Thanks, EO. Welcome back, Carl. I hope it was a lovely trip to the restroom. Husband was watching Chicago on TV in the other room, 25-6-4. Oh, nice. The Democrats embraced the word progressive because the right wing made liberal a dirty word. Exactly. Let's see. Lipinski does fall along with the Democrats in issues, and I like that. I differ from him on his guns issues. He's always been a good person. He has a strong conservative base. Where thugs win when we run bad candidates. President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama back-to-back victories show that a lefty message wins with good candidates. But you could argue that he was they were very kind of mostly centrist. They just focused in on some battles they thought they could win, and arguably, there was a Machiavellian aspect to the fight against DOMA and the Don't Ask, Don't Tell that Obama did by effectively playing rope-a-dope about his belief about gay marriage. And then Axelrod's book talks about this. Obama supported the idea, and Axelrod said, you want to get elected or not? And once you get elected, you can actually help push the country in the direction that you want. But if you go out there and you just be for it, the electorate in its current form will not elect you. And he was right. Had Obama not got in, though, Don't Ask, Don't Tell and DOMA still would have stood. But it's like this die-on-the-field messaging strategy is so goofy. I want Sherry to listen to the thousands of people who have called her office and told her the DCC strategy to not help any primary challengers is wrong. That's all. Well, that's fine. Then say that. But saying she's an awful person is a very distinct difference. I'm a progressive because I'm in favor of progress. It is 2019, not 1919. Yeah, but I think liberals are for progress. Liberals have always been for progress, especially social progress and social program reform. I get frustrated when people say that I don't know what I'm talking about regarding LGBTQ issues and how people really feel about it. No one says you don't know how people feel about that, Carrie. I think on occasion it's said that you allow that to swamp your it forces blinders on you about the behaviors and motivations of other people and makes you create villains where there are none. So, Dan Lipinski, whom we are no particular fan of, right? Voted yes on the Equality Act, yes on the More Health Education Act, yes on Protecting Americans with Pre-Existing Conditions Act, voted on both the Climate Action Now Acts, H.R. 9, when it passed and went back, voted for the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, voted for the Paycheck Fairness Act, voted, let's see, is there anything no that I can find that was an outlier? Voted on the Rejecting White Nationalism and White Supremacy Act, voted for the NATO Support Act, voted the Federal Civilian Workforce Pay Raise Fairness Act, voted yes on the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, voted, and whatever gun issues he may have, he was a co-sponsor on that one. Co-sponsor on H.R. 1, the For the People Act. Make further continuing appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for fiscal year 2019 and other purposes, bill which passed the House. Let's see. Voted no on the Manage Our Wolves Act. Voted no on Protecting Family and Small Business Tax Cuts Act of 2018, which was a Republican bill. I'm again, like, I get you may not like him and there may be somebody better. Totally cool. But the awful person aspect of it is the problem. Single payer will never come to pass. Well, single payer was the thing that they actually, the Blue Dogs scuttled. Many, if not all of whom are gone, not in an office anymore. Axiom of mine is that you cannot make things happen just by closing the bathroom door. The UPS person shows up just by you can make things happen just by closing the bathroom door. UPS person shows up just by taking a quick shower, and mom calls always when I sit. Strange but true. I agree. There's no reason why Dan's district is being represented by a centrist. Apparently there is, because they voted him in. I'm just saying, and again, you can argue that there should be somebody more liberal or progressive in there. I don't have a problem with that. It's the awful person argument, the instant vilification argument that keeps coming up. You know what I mean? That's the problem I have. Marie Newman would have been right there with Lauren and AOC and Ayanna and Rashida and Ilan and the Kays. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't have. That's a huge difference, and that's a fine argument to make. But it's not the same as saying somebody who voted for the Equality Act is a monster. It matters. That language matters. Michael Anderson, the fact that I bring my smartphone to the bathroom is why I happily let people borrow it with a smile. Ew, Evernum is terrible. Yes, there are no surprise cat visits, but that's good because I don't have Chud clawing into my thigh. But we're edging up on the time when we will have more Camden visits. We're about 2 weeks away. Very excited. Lipinski ran against a Nazi. I'd rather have him. Right. If you have a situation where you have a district where the other side can run a Nazi, then the idea that somehow the district is ready for a full-fledged progressive, Bernieite, for example, is sort of an absurdity. So it seems to point to exactly that this is why they have a centrist in that district. By the way, my delivery schedule is no way reflection on my bathroom schedule. William Lipinski, the father, moved from the 5th District to 3rd District when he was defeated by Rahm in Congress, and then Dan was a legacy vote. Well, that very well may be true, and they trust the family, and that's in. Again, I don't have a problem with people who run a business, mother to daughter, nor do I have a problem with people electing someone who follows in their footsteps. I don't like it in the case of a presidency, for example, but it's not surprising when they do it on a local level, especially when it's it makes sense even in smaller districts, because like, oh yeah, his dad ran the district, he knows everybody, we've been think get run pretty well around here or whatever, and the son wants to take over like a family business, we'll give him a shot. That's not surprising. Again, I don't have a problem with arguing the pieces of legislation and other stuff you want to do. I have a problem with the vilification, the making a human being that you disagree with a villain who votes your way. Like 100% of the time. That's the problem I have. We have enough. There are enough villains in the world. You don't have to make any from scratch. And if you think he should be primaried or put out to pasture, then go about doing it. But overwhelm him with your messaging and your ability, and you'll be able to do it. AOC won in 2 districts. She was only running in 1. She got written in another one. You know how she did it? Door to door. She won on the merits, not because she had help from the state congressional committee. She overwhelmed that district. In a speech on the House floor on Wednesday, Lipinski said that he would vote for the bill, but wants religious liberty concerns to be addressed before it becomes law. And those exist. People have religious objections. All it means is that there shouldn't be material influence of those religious objections. Those things should be solved socially, not governmentally in a lot of cases. And when we try to solve them governmentally, that's when we have the biggest backlashes. He still voted for it. Oh, my God. Because his district warrants it. That's the other thing, too. He may not even believe that, but his district will warrant it because I bet he got calls from a bunch of people saying, look, I understand that people should have rights or whatever, but I don't think the Catholic Church should be forced to hold gay wedding ceremonies if they feel as okay, cool, we'll have a conversation. Thanks for your input. We'll address them. Doesn't mean we're going to change the law, but we'll address them. We'll let it be known that you have that problem. And people can have their own opinion about the Catholic Church because we've said that's your limitation. I'm not throwing the Catholic Church under the bus for this. I'm just saying that's an example, of that. It's a difference. It matters. You represent your district, not just the isolated elements of your district. And so you find a way to linguistically do that. And you can't throw somebody under the bus every time they attempt to do it or thread that needle. Ugh. That's a license to discriminate. Religions discriminate. They discriminate against each other. They discriminate against behavior. It is, as long as the legal protections are there, no church can be forced to marry somebody who isn't their religion, much less anybody that they have a problem with. Like, discrimination is a factor of humanity. You discriminate. You discriminate against people. You discriminate against Sherry. You think she shouldn't be in office. You are discriminatory. You do not think she qualifies on moral grounds to participate in the legislative framework of your country. You discriminate based on that. You're not eliminating her right to run. You can't. But you discriminate against her in your behavior. You limit your voting for her and your support for her. You do not provide her with supportive secondary PR, which is what volunteers would do, for example. You withhold that service from her because you discriminate. Religions will do that. In doing that, the people in a secular democracy will make a decision whether to participate in those activities with those churches. As long as they don't cross into the secular business world or the experiential aspect, it is no one's business what any particular religion believes about any particular set of behavior. And if anything, as the rest of society moves on, it creates reasons why those specific religious belief systems get, thrown on the dust heap of history. You're not going to legislate the Catholic Church to support LGBTQ rights. It will never happen. Nor should it. Because you would never want the church to tell any religious believer what they say. In the same way that you would not want Methodists and Lutherans who believe that there should be, that are pro-choice, that they cannot be in how they, like you can't. I'm not quite sure what the balancing act there is. How about them socks? Yeah, thanks, Hal Victory. We'll try to hey, at least we got off abortion technically. Embarrassed and sad that my church voted against ordained LGBT, but American Methodists voted for it. It was the international church that outvoted us. Well, again, that's where eventually that's how reformations happen, Wes. And that's what happens when churches have diverted. There's a reason why there are Lutherans and Methodists and Episcopalians, and why the Episcopalian Church has been more supportive of LGBT rights and seen its base grow. Unlike Methodists and Lutherans, for example, which have seen their base diminish over time, and it's because of their open support and understanding that society has left those ideas behind, and that the sort of violent attitudes towards people in the LGBTQ community from the Abrahamic religions in particular, had a lot more to do with tribal limitations than the actual godlike philosophy of the religions themselves, because that's the one thing that most of these religions are working out, is which part is belief in the divine and an actual belief in God, mixed with the tribal laws and regulations and early governmental structures of Judaica and the Israelites and early European and Middle Ages Near Eastern philosophies, based on the idea of like, okay, we don't have cops, so the ghost of somebody looking over your shoulder all the time is really the only police we have. That kind of thing. As we transition, into a more like kind of fundamentally universal idea of what God is and how we interpret that, versus the old tribal concepts that were necessary to create order in those days, because societies advance. As we leave those behind, some religions will move forward in that and absorb that and understand that and be more open to that, which the Catholic Church has made steps to do in the last year or so, and which the Episcopalians have done. And if the Lutherans and the Methodists and the evangelicals don't do that, then society will socially leave them behind. And that's why, if you see in the evangelical world, while they seem to have an outsized influence, the reality is their numbers have a lot more to do with sort of the Walmarting of Christianity, and that they have a lot of mega churches and that have wiped out all the mid-level churches in the country, and where the balanced central thought of where do we balance our belief in God and our history of belief in God with how we now know people are born and live their lives. What we used to consider sin, that's a normal aspect of human life. How do we absorb that? And the natural conversation that used to happen around that, and is happening in many ways, like in the Episcopalian Church, that conversation got scuttled in a lot of ways by the fact that basically evangelical Christianity moved into two things: one, giant mega churches, and strip mall crazy people. My arguments in favor of legalizing gay marriage were based on equality in executing civil contracts regardless of sex. We have no argument to make compelling churches to marry people. Yeah, precisely. But people in those churches have a belief system, and one of the ways you talk about religious liberty is you go, hey, you don't have to do that. Now, when it comes to like cakes and stuff like that or whatever, it's like, look, you provide a physical service. You're not a Christian cake service. You have a cake company. You don't get to, the funny thing is, like, I know a lot of gay people who eat at Chick-fil-A because they like the chicken, and Chick-fil-A can discriminate against them by, giving money to, anti-LGBT organizations, but they can't not sell them chicken, right? That's the difference in our country. And they exist in a corporate structure because they can do that. I think they're awful. I wouldn't eat there because of that, but I have that choice. I want to be in the green, Lord. Chicago has a problem with family dynasties controlling politics, and we have to break that system. We did that with two families in the past election by removing the Dailies and the Mells from office. Exactly, but you don't do it by vilifying people. That's my point. I don't care if you're talking about primarying people, but this idea of, selling monsters is the problem I have. Purity tests. And the idea that somehow the individual, like the amount of glass house occupants chucking rocks at people in the purity test world is I find personally disgusting. Yeah, I'm not. The Catholic Church should let priests marry. That would change a lot of issues. I agree, but for a long time, and that's based largely on, again, the attitude towards gays in the community. They were like, hey, you're not going to get married, and at this point, we do not support the behavior for a lot of reasons. One is we're trying to grow a bunch of Catholics, so we can't support a behavior that does not result in children. Pair bonding that does not result in children does not help the growing Catholic Church in its war against other religions who are outpopulating us. You think this argument about, the Steve King argument is new. It is not. And so what they did was they set up a system, essentially. And so your lesbian daughters would go into the nunnery and your gay sons would go into the priesthood, and they would become effectively married to God, and they would be beneficial to the community, but they would never get in a situation where they would either be alone their entire lives without any kind of support system, or in a relationship that would break down and affect the village. Because we're talking about when small societies, when societies were much smaller and communities were much smaller. And so they would basically fold them in. The Catholic Church became a place, a repository, effectively, for early Catholics in Italy and the like the southern parts of France, and as it spread up into Europe. And you could, this is what they effectively did. This is how they handled it. It became a system that would not support itself. It had a function early on, or it wouldn't have continued. But that functionality outlived its usefulness probably about 200 years ago. But it's really coming to a head now. And I think you're right that the allowing priests to marry, and understanding and incorporating gay marriage into that aspect of it would eliminate a lot of the problems that they have. Agreed. Catholic Church doesn't want to support priests' families. That you may be right there as well. Obviously, that was a heavy lifting thing for the Methodist and Lutheran churches, because you would put up the whole family, and Methodists and Lutherans were encouraged to have lots of babies. So like having a church, the preacher already had like our Christian church when I grew up in Kentucky, they got a house as part of their deal. They got a salary from the church. They basically, the collection plate was their day-to-day, they're spending money for the week, but the church gave them the house. And then they would work at a job a lot of times the rest of the week. In the Catholic Church, the issue that led to celibacy was inheritance of property. It was a mix of issues, Hal Vickery. That is absolutely part of it. How it makes me laugh. Unknown to me in my youth, I was raised by gay men and women. Right. It's not limited to the Catholic Church, though. There are reports of evangelical doing various things as well. Agreed. Oh, well, that became a function. I'm not saying they're the only ones who did it. That became a functional system for a lot of, it's like the number of gay Marines. If you live in an area where it was looked down on, or you were picked on for being gay, one of the safest things you could do was become a Marine, because no one argues with the masculinity of a Marine in that regard. So, there's tons of that. This dude who used to open for me doing stand-up, who was gay, used to just troll for gay Marines whenever we were out. So it was amazing. He'd always show up with like 5 or 6 Marines who he'd been hanging out with all weekend. Okay. All right, butch, strong dudes, but it's clear they came from areas of the country where it wasn't accepted, and this is years ago. The life has changed, and the idea that somehow everybody's going to emotionally catch up to the circumstance is an absurdity. Parsonages is the house. Parsonage is the house. What's wrong with that? Our pastors were full-time, but this is Chicago. I don't mind that either. I think that's fine. No one is talking about the summaries Mueller prepared for release. Why aren't Dems pushing to see them. Well, I think they are pushing for the full report itself. The summaries are even a shorter thing. I think they find the messaging is a lot stronger asking for the full unredacted report. There are a bunch pushing for the summaries, though. It's just not getting, insofar as cable news, they're going to want to hear a lot more from the whole, the unredacted report is much easier to sell. I'm glad you drink the same not sweet tea. Speaking of stand-up, is your agent pissed at you? A little bit. But that's life. Who can't receive communion because they're divorced? Gingrich, right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love that Glenn Beck went religion shopping at one point, Aw. My girl just sent me a text, so I'm sending her heartbeats on my one of the coolest things about the Apple Watch is that you can send your heartbeat to somebody. Like that, it's a little like when I got it, I was a little like, okay, but it's like between Summer and I, because we both have them, it's actually quite nice. Boinking is influential. Tom, you Canadians gotta calm down with the harsh language. Let's see. There's plenty of Chick-fil-A's there. Yeah, just not my go-to when I decide to enjoy something that's not Whole Foods. Chick-fil-A, yeah. Can't stop lying. I'm so surprised I don't run into you more at the. I go to the town square Whole Foods most of the time, although they have the Sprouts now, that which has a limited. I can get most of what I need. We had a hell of a time finding malt vinegar anywhere when we were trying to make fish and chips for Summer's son a little bit ago. Bill Maher had a pretty good screed last night on the many high-placed liberal, hypocritical Catholics, Barr, Kavanaugh, Gingrich, Scalia. Yeah, I mean... Let's see. On a Series 3, let's see. Wait. They were doing it in his Mustang there. Can't believe Beck picking one. Yeah. Tea, Earl Grey, iced tea. Exactly. My weakness is fries and fry variations. Yeah. They're also pushing for the evidence. Yes. Carl, I don't know what that's in reference to, the Series 3, Series 4. I didn't see the top part of that, so fill me in. Mar is senile. He's not senile. He just smokes too much pot. And you can smoke too much pot. Sorry, I brought up the boinking word. Shame on you. The filth. It makes you proud of congressional masculinity. Isn't it a mix of black and other teas? Well, technically, all black tea is green tea that has been fermented. That's the only difference. Did people know that? You guys know that, right? That all green tea starts, all tea starts green. You know that, right? All plants, like tea leaves, start green. And then they age them for different periods of time. So the length of the aging and what they age them with, like orange pico literally is aged with orange peel, for example, affects the flavor of the tea as it sits, and ages over time. So there you go. Oh, from your watch, it's a 4. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. This is a 3 still. I don't have the newest, but it still works. It's great. Sprouts just open near within walking range. Now I kind of know where you live. That's funny. So look at that. We almost have a concurrent number of likes and viewers currently, which is pretty awesome. And our chat rate's really solid. Like the stuff they give me as far as viewer activity is pretty glorious, actually. And obviously we have a much bigger group. I knew that. Yes. Green tea used to be painted with copper. To make it glisten, I guess, but not to turn it brown. Boinky, boinky, boink. Ellie. Oh, and Act. I don't know if you're still in here or whatever, but I've got to hold on. I'm gonna tweet something your way. Because I found something just the other day that I was like, so I use this storage company called Clutter, and I did it when I moved. And let's see, I'm just gonna put it up on the. I could just call it my musical influences. And the extreme. Let's see, and I'll put this picture up because I found something that I was just so like, there it is. Let's see. And I think I don't know what your thing is, so I'm just going to hashtag it HSRPM. So take a look on my Twitter feed right now because I found this the other day. It's one of my prized possessions from high school. So there you go. My smartwatch told me that I died in my sleep. Might have been the battery though. Yeah. Hal, when did I? Well, I did order T-shirts and got my patch long ago, so you have my address. That's true. That's true. Yeah, but I don't know the geography of Vegas that well. Yeah. Are you ghosting now, Michael? Yeah. Congrats on dying and coming back to life. What was it like? Did you see a bright light? By whole leaf, tea is Camilla senses, white, green, oolong, black, and pu'er are the different fermentations of the same plant. Try rooibos for non-tea herb. That Sam of Lamb is absolutely right. Oolong is my favorite tea, in case you guys are wondering. And we are, let's see. We're about to start I'm going to start doing a thing where people can send, I get autograph requests all the time, but I never had an address where I wanted people to send stuff to, so I've now got one, and it's going to be posted on the website soon, but if you become a Patreon, I'm going to send that out to everybody in case, and it should be on the return envelope of, when you get stuff. That address is now on there, because I had to start it so that I could send stuff out without, crazy right-wingers mailing me, things with nails and dynamite in them. But in those cases, if you have any tea, you can send it there that you want me to recommend. Oolong is my favorite. Yeah. Apparently, English breakfast is just different blends of black teas. Yeah, English breakfast, quite frankly, most of the time is what we accept as Lipton tea also in the States. And it's literally the sweepings from an Indian tea, like a tea barn floor. So basically all the different tea leaves that they work with, the dust falls on the ground, they sweep it up, and then they make tea out of it. That's what's supposedly in Lipton tea bags. Blech. And it's very strong because it's a mix of stuff. It's like matcha because it's all powdered and broken down. White tea is very mild. That's true. It's blanched by the sun as opposed to fermented. Autograph a vinyl record, Hal? Absolutely. Michael's watch saw a bright light when he opened the battery compartment. That's right. I like your energy, just subbed. Well, thank you, Nigir. I appreciate it. I'm trying. Sometimes my energy gets a little scattered, quite frankly, when I'm fighting to keep the show on the air while we're actually doing the broadcast. But other than that, when it's just us and we're just hanging out, it's a good time. So, yes, it is gross. Like soda tea? Ew. I tried English breakfast once and wasn't a fan. Too strong for me. Also, yeah, it's basically the fermented matcha in a lot of ways, and matcha tea is the same kind of idea. Like there's refined matcha is actually very good, but a lot of times it was just the remnants of dried tea flakes on the ground, and they would just sweep it up. But you're basically drinking the flakes themselves, so they have more caffeine in them, as opposed to filtering the water through it and just drinking the water. That's why matcha has so much caffeine in it. Lipton drops all their teas on the floor. Yeah. I'm talking about one of your records. Oh, I see. Yes, absolutely. Turmeric ginger is my go-to for all my ills. It's a good time. I'm a big fan of golden milk. Do you guys drink golden milk? The turmeric, like almond milk mixes and that kind of stuff. Like I discovered that a while back, and I was like, this is pretty awesome. It's like a dessert in a beverage. Thank you, Moore's Doors. I intend to party on. Let's see. Set out 5 bags of Lipton and a big jar of sun tea. You know what, Michael? Every time, the only area of abject failure in my entire life, because I'm pretty much, 9 for 10 in life, I gotta say. I have 3 ongoing careers in 3 areas that have a 98% fail rate. I have added radio to that in the last couple of years, and I've turned it into something that I was kind of doing. So 4, right? 4 careers that most people fail at, doing all right. And pretty solid martial artist, pretty solid as far as, building my body comp and having that as a goal. I achieve goals. One area of my life where I just can't seem to make it happen, sun tea. Every time I try to make some sun tea, I either leave it out too long and I never take the bags out and it is just a dark, awful mess. Or it's just I add ice to it and it just gets awful. Just never good. I don't get it. I can make iced tea in the house. I can brew tea, pour it in ice, mix a little extra water. But for God's sake, just a sun tea. I bought the little jars with the little nozzle on them, I can live like somebody in a Pottery Barn catalog, and it never works. It's the one thing that dogs me in my whole life. When adding to food, the addition of black pepper magnifies the anti-inflammatory properties by a massive degree. That's great to know, Can't Stop Lying. Thank you. So turmeric and black pepper mixed together. I drink a peppermint ginger blend most days. That's a good time. Peppermint I can't drink because as a singer it dries out my voice. For the longest time I was like, people were always saying, herbal teas for your throat or whatever, and I was like, oh well, a mint tea is a good idea or whatever because it has some benefits to it or whatever. Dried my throat out, totally astringent, not good. It was like when I was singing with Sebastian Bach, and he was he has a lozenge right before he sings, and it's just how he works or whatever. And then I put one in, dried my throat right out, totally screwed me up, couldn't sing. I was like, no! It's just what he had developed over time. It was like his style, right? But you have to work your way into it. You can't just throw in a fisherman's friend and expect to be able to sing his bell tone notes like that. I had to transition. Now I can kind of do it, but back then, no way. I relied too much on mucus back in the old days to protect my throat. Thank you, Sing You, for coming in. Appreciate the chat. I really appreciate you being in here. It means a lot, and I appreciate your additions to the conversation today. They were well thought out and very helpful. Appreciate it. Almond milk from California. Well, it's going to be from here because we're the biggest almond producer in the country. Golden milk is a name of oolong tea. Oh, okay. How's already best? I try. Could be worse. You could try to make sun tea and have it rain for a week. That happened once. But I didn't use the capped kind of, the jars with the nozzle. I didn't use that. I just put a pitcher out. It overran. It was in Venice at the old house. I set it out on this back table or whatever. I was like, oh, the sun will be able to hit it. And it was outside because my back porch had a top on it, so I couldn't just leave it there. The sun wouldn't hit it, so I had to put it on the table outside the covering. Started raining, just overflowed. Tea bags on the table. It was terrible. I drank sun tea around smokers growing up, so maybe that's what's missing. Oh, maybe. Gotta go. Yeah, thank you guys for joining in today. I'm gonna sign off too. I gotta go on. You guys are awesome. Again, thank you guys for being Patreon supporters. It's not only helpful to us in making the show and growing it, and you see the stuff that because we pay a fee for the to do the streaming, which often works better than the station stuff. We pay a fee for the tie line to connect it to the station, which I'm trying to change. That's the goal. But all the gear and all this kind of stuff that I've accumulated over time, which just has been out of pocket up till now, I appreciate you guys being a part of that as supporters of the show. So patreon.com/HalSparks. Any level is great. If you up the level, every level below it is also yours. So if you're at the $5 level and you go to the $10 level, you get the $10 benefits and the $5 benefits and on and up. And I want you guys to know that and appreciate that. It's fantastic. Oh, by the way, Morsdor says, doesn't growing almonds require large amounts of water in a state with serious drought problems? Isn't this a problem? Morsdor, not only have we left the drought behind, but because California is not in a drought right now, but we are getting ridiculous amounts of water right now. So that's another. We'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks because this is happening right now. The rains and the storms that are coming that are hitting Northern California are uncontrollable, and some of the dams that they're going to put pressure on are protecting Disneyland and Orange County and Inglewood and Baldwin Hills and El Segundo, all down near the airport and all that stuff. It's dangerous. And again, this is an infrastructure problem. And isn't it Infrastructure Week? We'll figure it out. So bless you guys for being a part of this and being regulars. I have to say, like, it happens all the time, but like Thursday in particular, I was like, I miss the chat room. I feel like I wish, we obviously strategize and we get on here every weekend, so I know I can kind of bring you together, but I'll hop on randomly and a couple of people can join in. But there's something really beautiful about the fact that you guys join with me every week and you're here and we get to have these conversations, however comfortable or uncomfortable, talking about the stuff that we talk about. And I appreciate you guys coming here, bringing your A game in terms of discussing these issues. It's not a pedestrian activity. And those of you who just watch and don't participate in the chat, I want to thank you just for being here and accumulating the information and taking it in and factoring it in as part of your beliefs. I am not here to bulldoze anybody's ideology or anybody's system. I am simply here to inform as best I can your philosophy and your belief systems and your the facts that you use to verify and support your claims and ideas as best I can. So as much as I can do that, it feels great that you are here for that. So honestly, it's hard to even state without getting misty-eyed about it, but I really appreciate you guys. So I'm going to sign off, run off, and we've got rehearsal in a little bit. The guys are going to be rolling in here. This is our rehearsal space right now. Tig brought his downtown drum set in so that we can rehearse. There's bumpers, guitars over there. Chad's bass is on the wall. He hangs his over here. There's a couple of my guitars that I use. I know and I don't know why Bumper has two. Like that Marshall over there is the one he uses, but he's using the Soldano for some reason with one of my cabs. Nobody gave him permission. He didn't ask for consent about to use my cab. And then I don't know why they stacked them the way they did, but this my Line 6 amp, which I'm using for the gig tonight, they doubled up the head. They brought me two heads in one cab. What? These people are adorable. So, anyways, this is our place, and there's the new old mixer. This is a used mixer that Bumper has had forever. It's been sitting in the garage in a storage compartment. That's going to go down to the rehearsal space that we have in Vernon, where our lockout. Going to move that down there so that we can track. That thing's an artifact. That's a ancient piece of gear. Let me tell you. This was the one you guys helped me buy for the show. This Pro FX8. Replaced the other Pro FX8, which worked great, but got fried. I'm not quite sure how. Lightning storm, something like that. But this is directly because of you guys. And so thank you, patrons, for that. And of course, eventually we'll be able to afford another Rode thing to replace that, and this can just be used for this. It was meant to be a sub mixer for the band, but I basically stole it for use for the radio show because I needed a mix minus mixing board to do the show, so we wouldn't loop back to Chicago. See how well that worked out. I need to give this to Chicago so they can use it, so I don't get feedback. Anyways, the Rode thing that I bought, which was the very first thing we ever bought with Patreon funds, which hopefully in another month enough money will come in from the Patreon to do this because they're about $500, and we got about $300 some odd worth of Patreon subscribers currently. So after 2 months, we can, which it's been, I think, we can afford to get a second Rode one that I can bring here or travel with, because that's the other thing. I don't want to take it out of that studio, because if it breaks, we're back to square one, where I'm talking into a telephone microphone into a iPod Touch. Trying to eliminate that as much as possible. So, anyways, thank you guys. This is all because of you guys and the super chats and all that, and I appreciate it more than you will ever know. So, I'm going to sign off. That was the little studio tour. And if you want to subscribe and become a member of the Blue Patch Brigade, please do. You'll get one of these, and then you bring it to a show or wear it proudly to a show, and you can bring a guest to all my shows for free, which forever and ever. There you go. Which I'm sure at some point will reach a mass level where I'll have to curtail that. But right now, I don't care. That's a good problem to have. So you guys are, the insider group, and I appreciate it. So anyways, take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. We'll see you next week. It's the Hal Sparks Radio Program, Mega Worldwide post-show hangout also, I guess, as well, and everything. All right, we'll see you. Cheers, everybody. Thanks.
The preceding program contains ideas presented by the person who was hosting and not the people who were not chatting about it or any of the stories therein. All copyrighted infringement stuff is nobody's business. Buzz off.
There, that's to keep the Russian copyright strike bots from messing with us. That's really the only reason I need to put it up. Take care, everybody. Bye.